O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry. With pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.
The Hunting Collective is presented by Element.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Hunting Collective. I am Benjamin Patrick O'Brien, and I'm joined by Philip T. Engineer. Philip.
Hello, Benjamin.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Doing great.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. I would say first, a very sincere, a very serious, non-ironic thank you to everybody that checked in on me over the last week, that were wondering how I was feeling, sending me good vibes. A lot of people sending me like songs and videos to listen to, books to read, TV shows to watch. So thank you to everybody that reached out via email and then also reached out via Instagram, DM. Pretty cool. Makes you feel pretty warm when people out there thinking about you. So thank you very much to this THC cult out there. Why are you shaking your head, Phil?
Oh, you just called it the cult.
Yeah, I thought we agreed upon that. I thought that's where we landed.
Check the tapes. We never actually landed there. I never agreed to anything. And I was telling you about this. I have been getting my own messages from people who are not a fan of the name. They do not like to be associated with a cult.
Yeah. Well, listen, we did get a message from the leader of the cult. I thought who was going to be the leader of the cult. You know who it is.
Of course. I think
Eric Hall.
Yes.
He's not a fan of the term cult either. And so I think that's an issue in the guy you're going to tap to be like your, first in command of the cult, be picking out which flavor Kool-Aid we be drinking, that kind of thing. When he's not into it. He's not into it at all. Here's my favorite one. Well, only because it gives you a little bit of love here. Kyle reached out on Instagram. He said, why on earth would you call your followers a cult? It seems to me that it goes against everything THC stands for. For example, a bunch of mindless buffoons doing what they are told without asking any questions. Now, I feel you should just call us, because I am a weekly listener and enjoy it muchly, The Collective. Here's why. I'm actually referring to Star Trek, the Borg, where a collective that continually learn from one another, bettering themselves in the process, en route to taking over the universe. It's a perfect fit. And Phil, coming from a father of 4, your kids will become better adults if you spend more time taking them outside rather than playing video games with them. Thanks, Kyle from Canada. Do you play video games with? P.S. He said, "Hope you're feeling better." I'm doing just fine. Thank you, Kyle. Thoughts, reaction, Phil? Do you feel like the collective? That sounds too serious.
Yeah, but I mean, that already is the name. I feel like this guy's got a point. Even I'll get to the last thing he said later, but let's go backwards. Say that your show is already called The Hunting Collective. You're already implying that you and the people who listen are a part of this collective. It's got a name. Yeah. I mean, I think
every group of people that have a shared vision evolve, right? Most of them evolve into cults without saying that they do, without, if you're in the Church of Scientology, you're in a cult, you're just calling it something different. In this case, we are one of those cults that says, hey, we're a cult and we get it. We're just very open-minded and we're different, but we're a cult. No. Nothing. Okay.
I mean, I would like to just chide your listeners for, I think people come to this show because you like to tout yourself and your listeners as, like independent thinkers, like people who hear both sides weigh things and come to their own conclusions. Yet at the same time, whenever you ask them to do something, they immediately do it without question.
That's right.
So, I'd like these people to take a look in the mirror.
And
think about what you've become.
Hey, Greg Morris, you remember that time I said to make a thing about Phil, and then you had like a framed picture of Squeakers, rest in peace? Think about why you did that. Uh-huh. You're in a cult, and you didn't even know it. And I brought you there. So, no, that can't be. We'll have to think about this some more. We'll have to objectively look at what to call ourselves. I don't like the collective. I think it's too serious. But we got to call ourselves something. And apparently, if Eric Hall and Kyle from Canada, and even you, Phil, are telling me that a cult is not the way to go, then fine. It may be just like, when hunters, Phil, tried to like really whitewash the term kill out of the pursuit, and they said, "Oh, we harvest animals." Oh, we harvest. No, you don't harvest them. You kill them. Maybe later you harvest the meat, but you kill the animal. Here, we're not going to whitewash the term. We're a cult. We're proud of it. Okay, we are, but we're not mindless. We're mindful. Kyle from Canada. So we'll keep talking about that. We'll keep analyzing. But are you mad at him for? You don't play video games with your kids, do you? Your kids aren't old enough.
Oh yeah, they are.
Are they? Oh yeah, man.
Not the 2-year-old, not the 2-year-old, but the 7-year-old. Oh yeah. And on that note, Kyle from Canada, screw you.
Boom. You're out of the cult.
That's right.
Because in cults, there's no dissension amongst the ranks. You do what me and Phil say. Uh-huh. That is it.
And Eric. I guess it's like a board of 3. It's me, you, and Eric Hall.
Me and Eric Hall, yeah. Me, you, and Eric Hall. He's definitely on the board. He might be like more of a silent partner, but he does send in the weekly voicemails, which keep me going. Anyway, moving on. Listen, we'll keep working on it. We'll keep workshopping it. For now, we're the cult. We're going to stay the cult. You're all cult members if you choose to be. If not, you can't leave. So what are you going to do? You're not going anywhere. Nothing you can do about it. All right, Phil, we got to get a lot to get to. And one of the things we got to get to is Anya Fernald, who is an entrepreneur and the CEO of Belcampo Farms. I had a hell of a good time talking to Anya about everything. We didn't really get too specific. We did for a short bit about Belcampo Farms, but we've talked about regenerative agriculture on the show. We've talked about sustainable meat. We've talked about how we scale. We've talked about plant-based meat. We've talked about the anti-meat movement. We've gone through all of this stuff, and we come to Anya, who is the CEO of a company who's trying to take control of the entire process. They own their own slaughterhouses, they own their own regenerative farms, and they own the retail side of the business as well. So she has a model that's self-sustaining and maybe can get us a little bit further along the lines that we've talked in this show before, which means scaling the way we feed ourselves in this country, the way that the industry at least is set up to feed us. So a great conversation. As we were talking, Phil, Anya she was home because of quarantine with the kids, and there's some noise in the background, but you'll hear Phil is going to cut it all out of there. He's going to make it sound beautiful. He's going to make it sound perfect. Anyway, you'll have to get over some stuff there. She had a little bit of noise in the background throughout the thing, but she has a lot of really powerful stuff to say. And we had a great conversation, and I enjoyed the hell out of Anya Fernald. So stick and stay for that. But before we get to that, we got to announce a brand new contest, Phil.
Oh, man, here it is.
Phil and I spent hours workshopping this last night.
That's true.
Over a Zoom call,
and then a couple text message threads afterwards. We just couldn't. The ideas were flowing.
Yep. And we took wine glasses, filled them up with watermelon White Claw, frozen watermelon bits in there. It was lovely. It was a lovely evening. Candles, all kinds of things.
Of course.
Here's the deal: we haven't done a contest in a while. It's been a while. How long has it been? It's been like since the summer since we've done a contest.
Was it pre-COVID?
No, it was during COVID because we did the Great American Outdoors Contest. Man,
God, this thing's been going on so long.
I know. It's just like real life now. It's not even a pandemic game. It's just like, well, this is kind of what it is. Don't get close to grandma. It's going to be rough for a while. But we haven't really did any contests. For one reason, it was hard to fulfill the prizes of the contest because we had so many delays in getting stuff to people. We finally got that figured out. But we got a new contest, Phil. And we don't really know. We spent so much time talking about it. We don't really know exactly what we want. But it's one of those things where we'll know it. Phil and I will know it when we see it. You'll do something cool, and we'll say, that's what we were asking. That's what we were thinking. That's what we wanted you to do as soon as we see the damn thing. And so here's the deal. I watched The Social Dilemma. You ever watch that, Phil? You ever watch The Social Dilemma?
No, I've been too scared.
Yeah, it scares the living bejesus out of you. And I talk about it a little bit with Anya coming up in the episode, but I got a little bit spooked, and I don't know if I made a mistake or not. But here's what I did. I watched The Social Dilemma. I got scared that social media was trying to addict me and keep me on there 10 hours a day. And I unfollowed everybody on Instagram. All the hundreds of people that I followed. You included, Phil. You're off. You're out.
That's okay. I understand.
Yeah, well, we could still be friends. I unfollowed everybody except for one page, Phil. And guess what that page is?
Well, it's got to be our title sponsor, Element.
It's not Element, although now...
I'm sorry, you unfollowed Element?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
It was a rash decision. I know I have to build things back up, but the only one I couldn't get rid of was White Claw.
Okay.
That's it.
That's great.
Now, so if you go to my page on Instagram, at BennyOB301, you'll see that I am following only White Claw. I'm a little bit worried that I made a mistake, because I got spooked by the Social Dilemma documentary, and next thing I know, it's just me and White Claw, and I'm refreshing, and it's just White Claw pictures the entire time. And I think that's not good for me, because I'm going to just become a major alcoholic in a very short time because of this decision that I made.
I'm sorry, you're going to become a major alcoholic?
Whoa. I know. I'm a stereotypical Irish guy who drinks 6 White Claws a day. I know.
That was too easy. I apologize.
Yeah, it was taking the bait. So anyway, here's what we're gonna do. I have a number of. I'm not even gonna tell you what the number is. I have a number of Yeti tumblers with the THC logo emblazoned on the side. Only available in a box in my office at my house. Only available there. That's the only place they exist. So I have those. And then I have a what I'll call a crap ton of Element here, waiting to send to loyal THC listeners. Now that's like the material product that you'll gain from this. But if you want to know what's the real prize, Phil? Do you know you want to explain to people what the real prize is?
The friends we made along the way.
No, nope. What did we talk about? What's the real prize here? What's the real thing that people are going to be excited to get out of this?
You are going to follow them on Instagram.
Unbelievable. Do you have like some sound effect of trumpets?
There it is. Wow.
Perfect.
Triumphant.
Unbelievable. You're going to be, as I undo my mistake, you're going to be the winners of this contest are going to be the first people that I follow on Instagram. That way, when I refresh my Instagram, the only thing is you and White Claw. And imagine being in a cult where you're this close to the leader. I mean, unbelievable for you guys. It's gonna. I mean, it's like getting a brand new robe or something. So, anyway, that is the prize. You want me to tell you what the contest is, Phil?
I would love to hear it.
The prize is amazing. I would almost do anything for this. Here's what you got to do. And there's two ways to enter. The first way to enter is to email me. The second way to enter is to tag me on Instagram so I can see it there. Because I got nothing else to do there. Because when I go there, I got nothing to look at now. So tag me, I'll see it. Help me out. This is going to be a holiday traditions contest. And it's a bit of a choose your own adventure kind of thing. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a photo, make a video, some kind of thing. Photo or video is pretty much the only two ways you can participate here. Showing the way you do the holidays. Wild game dishes, cool photos with your grandfather. Well, that might be less of those in COVID times. Cool meals, family traditions, things that make me and Phil laugh, drawings of Phil and Phil Jr. and Thanksgiving garb, anything, Thanksgiving or Christmas related, or however you celebrate. Could be Kwanzaa, doesn't really matter. You send us something that makes us laugh, post something on Instagram that makes us laugh, makes us feel all warm and fuzzy for the holiday season. That says THC, that what we're all about in the cult, and that says what you're all about at Thanksgiving. Mix those two things together and come back with something amazing. It could be a cocktail. You could take the time to do a cocktail. The more intricate the thing that you do, the better, and the more funny it is, the better. Does that all make sense, Phil, to you?
Yes, I'm a big fan of this contest.
Yeah. So we want to feel your holiday festive feelings, and we want to know that you love THC. That's all. And we will send you Element, a Yeti tumbler, and I will follow your ass on Instagram. Now, if you don't have Instagram, this makes a whole lot of no sense to you. But you could just get Instagram. It's pretty fucking easy. Just go over there, sign up for it. And then you'll be there, and you can be part of this. And you may win something. And ultimately, I'm going to see at least a few of you every day when I log into Instagram. No matter what you're doing, I will see it. So anything to wrap this up, Phil? I know you're really invested in this one.
No, I just, as one of the 3 board members of the cult, I just want to see, just share your holiday traditions. And Ben said it, like, I don't even necessarily think it has to do with THC, something that like reminds you of the holidays that you look forward to. That's what I want to see.
Something cool. Yep.
And why and why it's important to you.
That's right. So email us at thc@themeateater.com or tag me at BennyOB301 on Instagram, and we'll get to getting on. You'll be listening to this hopefully on Tuesday. You have until next Tuesday to get this in. You have 1 week to get in your entries. We will review some of them in podcasts to come here down the road. So got a lot. I got a number of tumblers. I got a lot of Element, and I got unlimited amount of followers I can follow on this here Instagram. So get it together, send us something cool, and we'll give you priceless gifts this holiday season. Moving on, Phil. Before we get to Anya, a couple things we got to get to. Got an email from Dana Zook. Dana says she's got kind of a This may be for you, Phil. She's got an email that says guidance on conflict with another hunter. This may be a Dr. Phil medicine woman time, but you let me know what you think after I'm done reading this. Okay. Don't want to put any pressure on you. She says, gentlemen, so I suppose I should start out by saying this is a quote unquote pending conflict, but one I am certain will occur when the season starts here soon in Ohio. There is a piece of property, private property, just a few miles from my house, where I have hunted waterfowl for several years. It is a nice pond, small, but fun to hunt, and we have done quite well there. Until recently, I was the only one permitted to hunt it because the owner had too much trouble with other people. This year, the property sold, and the new owner allows people to hunt it, which I generally have no problem with at all. I've met a couple of hunting buddies by showing up at the same spot with them in the morning. However, during the early portion of Ohio's duck season, at the beginning of October, I went to the property to check and see if there were any birds using it, as I had thought to hunt it the next day. I noticed that there was a portable blind beside the pond and a number of decoys on the water. However, there was no one there. I went back later, and the blind and decoys remained, but still no one there. I called the landowner to see if he knew whose stuff it was. He says, oh, it's probably so-and-so. Here's his number if you want to call him. I call the guy, and he tells me, yes, it's his stuff, and he intends to hunt there for the next day and for the next couple of weeks, in a sort of my stuff is there, so I'm the one hunting it for now type of way. He told me he had hunted there for the past 4 days but hadn't seen a bird, which I know is bullshit, this not seeing birds part, I mean. He said that he intended to remove the stuff after the early season was over, which was the following week, so I didn't make too much of an issue of it. Today, 7 weeks later, I went back to check the spot and noted his blind and decoys are still there. The blind half torn apart by the weather and the decoys scattered all over the pond, with most of the goose decoys missing their heads, which were scattered about other places on the water. Again, this is private property, which several different people have permission to hunt. The guys who left his stuff out there knows this. And it is a good spot right now down the road from my house. I also hunt other properties owned by the same person. So what's your move? Get there extra early, knowing the other guy is going to show 10 minutes before shooting time, planning to crawl in his already set up spot, pack his stuff up, and put it in his blind, hunt over his spread, call him and try to work it out. From the previous conversation, the fact that he's leaving his stuff out there for the whole season on property he knows others hunt, I'm going to go ahead and guess the guy isn't going to respond real favorably to any of these options. Do I just bite the bullet and give up that spot so as not to cause an issue and lose permission from the landowner on the other spots? Thanks. Keep up the good work. Dana. What do we do about this, Phil? This is one we've kind of run into on public land before. I think we even had a story on the show where an antelope hunter was leaving their blind on public land next to a water hole. But in this case, it's private land, and so there's other things at play. Phil, as a non-hunter, what do you think?
One of my least favorite things in the world is when you go to a movie theater and you're looking for seats, and there's one person there who spread like 5 coats across an entire aisle.
Saved.
They're like, oh, I've got friends coming. No, I do not like this. What is preventing Dana from just, I mean, if the guy's not there, just like setting up a blind next to this guy's blind and hunting over his decoys or his spread, is that frowned upon?
It's not frowned upon. I mean, this is a situation where you just got to work it out. But what I would say is if somebody's leaving their decoys and blind up anyway, that kind of takes away your ability to set up your own decoys the way you want, the direction you want. Let's say the wind direction is shifted. Let's say you have a different style. Let's say you're going to do less decoys, more decoys. Let's say you're going to do a spinner. Let's say you don't want to put geese out. Whatever the deal is. We don't really know from Dana what exactly he's after in terms of species of ducks. But it just gives you less options because you already either pack up that guy's stuff and which seems asshole-ish, on its face, just to touch another guy's property and throw it back in the ditch or something. But regardless, he's kind of staking his claim that this is his spot by leaving his stuff there. So that's no bueno. But the question really is, Phil, what do you do? Now, I know that you love conflict.
Big fan.
I know, yeah, you call me up all the time just yelling at me about random stuff. So, Phil, there's 2 options, maybe 3 options here. The first one is confront the guy and say, hey, and take control of it. Say, hey, man, this is how we do things here. I'm a veteran hunter. I know the landowner. This is how we do things in general. We don't leave our stuff out like that. I don't want you to get your stuff stolen. Make it about him. I don't want you to get your stuff stolen. I don't want you to get your stuff damaged. It's just not a good idea to leave stuff out there. And so, if you don't mind taking that up, you can hunt whenever you want. Nobody cares. First come, first serve in terms of hunting. But don't leave your stuff out there if you don't mind. We're just kind of worried about what might happen to it. And landowners hate when bad things happen on their property because of liability. So you don't want to do that. So that's one thing you could do. The other thing, as he mentioned, is you could, as Dana mentioned, is you could not go back. But I don't know about you, Phil, but I would definitely go back. I would definitely have this phone call and try to work it out. If I felt like I couldn't work it out, I probably would not alert the landowner and just continue to hunt the rest of the private property I had access to. So I didn't get into so I wasn't labeled a problem hunter for this landowner who is nice enough.
Yeah, that was my first instinct was like, well, this is something that you'd think the landowner would care about, but I guess you wouldn't want to create like a big kerfuffle where there doesn't have to be one because you might just lose access to the land. Is that kind of...
Yeah, you just never know. You'd have to read the tea leaves with the landowner. If you had a landowner who's like, I'll do this as long as there's no trouble. Trouble's trouble no matter whose fault it is. And so... I've had that happen before where landers like, yep, you can trespass on my ground to get to that public spot as long as nothing happens, like a gate isn't left open. So then you're like, that's a very precarious situation that you're in because you got to figure out how serious this landowner about letting me do this. And am I on thin ice should there be some sort of blow up with this other hunter and we're both calling the landowner bitching and he don't want to deal with that problem and he's going to kick us all out of there. So that's another thing to think of in terms of that. So I think those are your 2 options. I mean, the third one could be just to, I guess, go in there and hunt it and avoid the other guy's decoys. But if they're spread out on a small pond, there's nothing you can do. Generally, waterfowl don't like to land next to floating goose heads, as far as I know. And so it's going to make it tougher for you. It's going to make it less advantageous to be hunting that spot anyway. If there's a bunch of debris in the pond that you don't feel like you can touch. So, Dana, I would say if it was me, I'd call that guy and just play the veteran card. I've been around. I've seen this stuff. I just want to make sure there's no problems here. If you don't mind, just pick your stuff up. You can stash it in the woods and put it out quickly when you get there. You can do whatever you want. Just leaving it out is going to cause problems. So if you don't mind, help a brother out. See where you get. At least you made the effort. At least you made the effort.
Hear, hear.
Here. Okay, that's good. It just also depends, man. Like wherever, if this was here, there's so much public. Well, I don't want to say so much, but there's plenty of public water around Montana where I could get a good duck hunt in. Small water, small streams, creeks, ponds, places where I can get a good duck hunt in where I don't necessarily have to battle for that. But if you're a guy who doesn't have a whole lot of options, you have few options, you might want to think about putting up a fight. In the best way possible, not just yelling or coming to blows or anything like that. So that's hopefully, Dana, Dr. Phil and I have helped you on that one. We'd like to resurrect Dr. Phil Medicine Woman, but Phil, didn't you lose the sound effects?
Yeah. I was hoping you wouldn't bring it up, but yeah, the hard drive that the sound effect was on got corrupted, and I could pull it from an old episode, but I'll do that eventually if I have to.
Happens to the best of us. Well, we got a really good interview this week, so we're not gonna. And you guys got to get to work on your awesome holiday content for THC to make us laugh, make us think. So we're gonna keep this one short and get straight to Anya Fernald and a good conversation about regenerative agriculture, the business of meat, and everything that happens at Belcampo Farms, which is her company. Enjoy. Good morning, Anya. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having me today, Ben.
Well, we got a lot to talk about, but I could tell we were just laughing we use Squadcast, of course, for the show now that we're in COVID times. And not a sponsor, Squadcast. So if it messes up, we'll blame them. But they show us a little map of exactly where you are. A little bit creepy. But it looks like you're by some water. So I'm going to guess California.
I am. I'm in the Bay Area in NorCal. Our farms are in NorCal. You know, I was in LA last week, and it's real different up here. I don't need to get into my politics on it, but I don't like that I get yelled at if I'm not wearing a mask walking down the street by myself with my children. That's NorCal. And then SoCal is a very different vibe. In SoCal, I'm like, yo, like, slow your roll, people, like, get you step away. So I feel like in between the two, I'm somewhere in between the two, between like East LA and then East Bay, which is kind of where I recently spent time. So yeah, it's like everywhere right now. I think there's a lot of fear and concern.
Yeah, so, a lot of uncertainty. We'll get into obviously what your business is and some of the really cool things that you do, but what challenges have you seen on a professional level from this? Because I know your operations are massive or becoming so. So
I really see only opportunities, and I'm not just saying that to be like business speaky. You know, COVID gave me this moment where I was able to focus on what really mattered in many areas of my life. And in my business in particular, I had a rough month. I mean, I'd say the hardest month of my life was that like mid-March to probably end of April. And what happened in that month? I permanently closed 2 restaurants. I had to fire 300 team members. My e-commerce site became overwhelmed and crashed multiple times, and our fulfillment was a mess. We came close to running out of product a few times. A lot of my expansion plans in retail were stymied. So this is something people don't understand, is that everyone was going bananas in the grocery stores and people were buying everything, but new stores weren't taking on new products because they couldn't manage. They were riding the wave, right? So we were hoping to get slotted in lots more stores, and we just couldn't do it because nobody wanted to take a call with a new vendor in that time. So I had a really aggressive growth plan around my grocery channel that changed, but e-commerce picked up, and now grocery's picking up again. And then the beautiful thing that happened is, one good decision I'd made pre-COVID was to invest really heavily in the delivery platforms. So when COVID hit, I was on every platform. I had the right software in the restaurants to like process all the orders and put them directly into the kitchen. Some of these kind of like functional things. I had excellent photography on all the platforms. So we've actually been in a really privileged position where the restaurants that I have remaining are all up year on year. And there's 2 reasons. One is that we're well positioned on digital. And 2 is that we've a product that's justifiably branded and associated with wellness and health. I position my products as we're an animal wellness company, animal wellness in support of human wellness. So a lot of my clientele are people who are interested in optimal performance or longevity or all these kind of things. And that's something that we do. Then the other thing is, I feel empathy for the people selling seaweed salads right now, because it's like there's a moment in COVID where people are looking at their food dollar and saying, wow, do I want to spend $15 for 300 calories? That seemed like a good idea a month ago, but right now it really doesn't, right? And so my food is high calorie, high fat, high protein. We sell a lot of hamburgers. We do salads that have like half pound of meat on them. It's a very meaty brand. So that, even though we're a premium price point, I think our type of food has been appealing because it does represent value. If you're actually looking to spend more for good calories as opposed to spend on something where you feel kind of satiated, but you don't get many calories, which is like, especially in California, what people were looking for prior, we're in a nice position right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask, kind of answer my next question as you were talking there. I was thinking of, is it, you have a product that has a premium price point. Do you feel like the market changed during COVID times to be more about access? I just want it. I want it at my house. I always thought maybe price point would come become a much more important with the economy. But it sounds like really it's the value of what they can get and how quickly they can get it and easily they can get it.
Yeah. So I've been surprised by that. I initially thought we would be in a real bind around our price point. And to that end, I've launched multiple trials with like a cheaper, non-organic, but still regenerative product alongside an organic product at a higher price point. And I continue to only sell out of the organic product at the higher price point. I also think this is just a bit of a kind of random factoid, but this is the first year that I've been sold out of turkeys like a week before Thanksgiving. And my turkeys start at $85. So I don't know what's going on. I think there's a couple things that from where I'm sitting. One is people want things that they can trust, right? Everything's gone topsy-turvy right now in the world, right? There's a huge amount of discombobulation. We're a brand. We stand for something. We have high integrity. I can tell you where all the stuff comes from. We've been there throughout this pandemic. We've been open every freaking day, which has been no small feat, through riots and fires and everything. It's like Belcampo's doors have opened. We've sold our customers really high quality meat. We've stayed really friendly. So I think that counts for something. I got to think that counts for something in terms of why we're showing some lift right now. The other piece is I think a lot of really gnarly stuff about the meat supply system had some sort of flex during COVID. I think people started to look behind the curtain a little bit and got kind of grossed out. So I think there's probably a part of my customer base that's getting a bit more aware of the issues and wanting to make a better choice, right?
Yeah. It certainly seems that way. It certainly seems that some of the conditions in large scale processing factories and other places, and the fact that some of these employees are getting COVID, it seemed to pop in the news for reasons that I couldn't explain. But it's good to hear you say that people are really looking for quality in a time like this. Can you quickly tell us, not quickly, we have plenty of time, but tell us about Belcampo, how it came to be, what it is, because I got a ton of questions about, scale and sustainability and all those things within your business. But, people really need to know exactly what the vision is around Belcampo.
Sure. The company is a vertically integrated premium organic meat supply chain, in short. What does that really mean? It means that we own pastures in California. We built and operate our own slaughterhouse, USDA approved, and we have a group of retail stores. But more importantly, in the growth channel for the company is we sell direct to consumers online and in an increasing number of grocery stores. So my vision is to become a national meat brand that people can trust if they're concerned about issues of animal, human, planetary wellness. And they don't, right now, the brands you can find most broadly in meat without going to a farmer's market really ask you to check your values at the door, right? And so I'm trying to create a brand in a product that checks all the boxes. And what that means is that I can go in there, and I say this about my product all the time. We are climate positive. We are carbon sequestering operation. We are farming regeneratively. Our land has been tracking to increase carbon over the past 7 years. Okay, so there's your climate piece. We are focused on animal wellness. We use only evolutionary diets. Our animals are all pastured, not just free range. They don't just have access to outdoors, but our chickens and pigs actually live outdoors their whole lives. We are slow growing. So our protein grows at the same kind of pace that a wild animal would, right? It's somewhere between 2 and 5 times as long, depending on species, as a conventional operation. And we're also, certified humane in terms of our handling, certified organic. So all those pieces are part of it as well. So by listing this off, I'm saying, okay, consumer, if you are concerned about meat for any one of these reasons, don't like what it does to the planet, don't like what it does to animal, don't like what it does to your body, because that's something that we should talk about. There's a lot of toxicity is kind of a very LA word, but there's a lot of problems with an inflammation associated with the animal's diet and how it extends to human diets, right? So when we actually eat animals that are inflamed, we too get inflamed. So people who are concerned about human health and have things like IBS, et cetera, that's going to be an answer for them as well. So all of these pieces are concerns, right? They're all things that customers and people in America say, hey, I wish I could eat meat if it only kind of did these things for me or wasn't this bad. And what I say is, here it is. Here's the product that doesn't do those things. It's going to cost more, right? And that message and that product has been in the past, 18 months really thriving. And we position ourselves, as mentioned, animal wellness in support of human wellness. So our clientele tends to be people who are as interested in planetary health as they are in their own human health.
Yeah. And on this show, we've dove into, I feel like, regenerative agriculture, and our audience understands it and they know it from a ground level perspective. We talked to some folks from Impossible Meats. We've talked to one of their first
I love that
employees.
episode, by the way. Fabulous. Listen.
Thank you. We've tried to dig into a lot of what's happening here on many levels, and I like that. And some of the sales pitch I've heard from some sustainable meat companies or regenerative agriculture is there's this anti-meat movement out there, and we're fighting. It's like kind of a building it up as we're fighting against this anti-meat movement. And reading about you and even listening to you talk now, what I like is that you're saying, I'm building something self-sustainable. I'm building something from beginning to end that could scale. And I've read some quotes from you where you're talking about scale. And that's something that we've always kind of stopped short on this show when we're explaining these things, as we try to determine, it's regenerative agriculture is great. How do you scale it to feed everybody? Because certainly the plant-based meat companies have figured out scale already and have a bunch of Silicon Valley tech dollars pouring into their companies. So I think one of the more important things we can talk about here is scale. Like how do you take what you have and scale it so it really does have an even larger impact than what you already are having?
Absolutely. And first, I want to address one assumption in how you just described the alternative meat movement. They have figured out scale, but we still see a massive negative gross margin in those products.
Yeah.
To be clear. So, you could look at it in their SEC filings, right? It's hypothetical that when they get to a massive amount, but right now, every, one of those burgers that you buy, you're getting a check from somebody in Menlo Park. Okay. So your $2 burger is an $18 food cost. So that it's not clear there's also a lot of externalized costs in there, obviously, but actually on a pure dollars basis, it also doesn't make sense right now. Now, who knows? Once they take over China, that might be different, right? There's a lot of doors that apparently open when you get to really massive volumes, right?
Yep.
So our operation, let me just speak to the tactics of how I'm scaling. We currently have 3,000 beef. We have about 2,000 pigs. Just over 1,000 lamb, and we produce 60,000 chickens a year. We also produce turkey, geese, and ducks in smaller volumes. That's a small operation in America, okay? But it's a headache, okay? It's a lot. And the reason it's a lot is that, our beef, they're on somewhere between 6 and 15 different pastures during the course of their life. They're moving from pasture to pasture. There needs to be a guy who isn't just showing up and dumping a bag of feed into a bucket, who's actually managing a process and understanding and paying attention to nutrients and to sugar levels in grass, right? There's a level of engagement and intellectual kind of responsiveness in that work. It's a more costly type of work, and it's a more costly way of raising animals for a lot of different reasons. So that process, right, is going to be much more expensive, but it's also more complicated to manage from a human perspective and a knowledge perspective. So my goal isn't to, let's say, do that times 300, because already at the scale that we're at, from an operational management complexity situation, it's a lot. And it also doesn't make sense to me to say, okay, we're going to become like a 1 million acre regenerative farm. Right? That doesn't really align with the kind of like human touch. You think about it in things like cheese. You have artisan small scale dairies where they do things sort of low and slow the right way. And when you get bigger, there's a human error factor that comes in place. And so for various like safety and complexity reasons, the processes tend to get less artisanal, right? That happens again and again. Yep. And you look at the great artisan cheeses that scale. I used to be a cheesemaker, so I have a lot of like cheese kind of relevant information that I realized
I like cheese analogies. Yeah, I dig it.
But like like a Parmesan, right, is an incredible brand, incredibly consistent product, but it's literally thousands of small producers, right? There isn't like Mr. Parmigiano over there in Italy making all that stuff. It's a collective of smaller producers. And the reason they scaled that way is because you can retain the artisanality of it. Because there's the the phrase of like management by walking around, right? there's a lot of management by walking around in regenerative ag. So our plan is to, and we've already begun this year, to scale by actually, building partner relationships with local farms and using our regenerative practices to coach them down their regenerative path, right? Some of these guys are already pretty far there, right? And then we're processing the animals in our own USDA facilities. We keep that traceability. And then as we scale, we'll be linking the end product to the origin farm, the origin partner farm, via UPC codes on any retail products. That's the future plan. Okay, right now, 95% of my needs are met by our own farm. And God bless, it'll be a great problem to have when we start to outstrip that farm's potential. But our, director of our supply chain has been working. We now have relationships with 9 smaller regenerative operations in Northern California in beef. And these guys are looking for a way out. These guys are not finding a remunerative market for their incremental spend. Like to do regenerative, you spend a lot more, but you're not able to capture that. What are you going to do? Get into pick up every Saturday and drive to San Francisco and sell meat at the farmer's market? That's kind of the only way you can claim a price point like what we're able to claim. So we're able to effectively kind of reduce their marketing load as well, which is something that's typically a welcome step.
Yeah, I mean, this is it sounds to me like, and when the reason why I was excited to talk to you is like, this sounds to me like, I don't want to call it the Holy Grail, but it maybe, because when you say on the website, meat you can trust, there is always a hole in that game. There, in most examples I've seen, there's always kind of a hole in how do you get enough meat to market? How do you get it to a price point where people can stomach it? And then how do you make sure you can take that model and grow it when there's nothing really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, as much as plant-based meat might have proprietary technology, there isn't necessarily anything you're doing that's proprietary and can be protected from intellectual property wise. And so it just feels like if you're able to box all this in and say, I'm doing everything from A to Z, it can scale. Yeah.
And it's going to scale through a tapestry, right? It's going to be a wide range. And for me personally, Ben, like in terms of the itch, everyone's got like their itch to scratch in their life in terms of achievement goals. And the idea of like building just a massive business that just is us and getting bigger and bigger and more cows and more farms and more cows and more farms, like that's not that interesting to me. The idea of providing a viable way for many, many smallholder farms to pivot to the best way of doing things is super powerful, right? That's really exciting. And that's kind of like I think that's the right direction, right? It's like, because there's also a lot of, the other side of the coin with the ag system as it is today is the farmers themselves are not being served, right? So there's the sense that or people sort of imagine that like Corn Belt, Iowa producers think Monsanto and GMOs are great. Well, guess what? They're making less money than they did 15 years ago. They're in much, much more debt than they were 15 years ago. They don't have any control over what they do. And guess what? You don't become a farmer because you like to be told what to do, right? So there's a real shift, like I think in the perception of what these businesses are doing, the agribusinesses are doing, if they're in support or against family farms. So, we've lost like 90% of farmers in the past couple of decades, right? There's a massive consolidation and people are just leaving the industry. So there's also, it's not like this is it's going to be a bunch of hipsters who, buy 20 acres. It's like, no, we're actually talking to, when I say our partner farms, these are like multi-generational, really, fantastic operators here in California, 5th and 6th generation cattle ranchers that are like, yo, stop this train. I want to get off.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
We were talking about this in another sense a couple episodes ago about generational land. How do you maintain generational land? Those stories, ultimately the animals and the agriculture that's there, without having them be beholden, as you said, to industry and to exactly all the problems that are happening within that industry. So it's good to hear. Have you, when you think about, I read a quote where you were talking about alternative food. Do you think about your meat as alternative food or the approach that makes it alternative? What about Belcampo is alternative? You know, I know
we got the most basic high nutrition food in history. We're basic in terms of what we do. But what's alternative about it is the style of production. It takes our operation 5 times as long to raise a chicken as it does in conventional industry. So that's like, and I also think, Ben, it's like, we're kind of like willfully anti-efficiency. That's why we're alternative, right? And it's like, well, willfully anti-efficiency in the interest of wellness, and health of people, planet, animals, right? It's like, but to do that, it's like, we've, in the meat supply system, American consumers were, I think, don't realize how much they gave up. It's like, do you want cheap meat? Hell yeah. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. Do you want like this stuff that tastes so bad, you got to soak it in a million sauces and smoke it? And by the way, you have to overcook it consistently because it's so likely to have pathogens. And oh, by the way, there's like lots of different types of toxicity that's implicit in that meat. And by the way, there's a lot of, other issues that are, there's just a whole range of decisions that were made that have really significant consequences that we didn't sign up for, right? But that by paying that price and getting those savings, we did sign up for. So, the question for me is like, when we look at that $3 a pound chicken breast, we don't understand what we did to get that, And then when we actually say, people taste my chicken and they're like, oh, how does this taste so good? Or like, I don't have to use all this teriyaki sauce or whatever I'm doing. And why is it like not chewy? And now does it feel so bad to pay, 3 times the price? No, it's totally worth it because this is a great experience. And I'm also more full. These are all things that I hear from people and that I myself experience, but we built this system where it's all about price. And then there's a huge amount of other costs, and we don't really understand what we've given up in exchange for those savings.
Yeah. I like that you say, the taste of meat too, because maybe we can get to gaminess at some level. But my wife is a good example of somebody. She doesn't hunt. And we first got together about 11, 12 years ago. All wild game was venison. It's like venison is gamey or venison is this. Everything was venison, no matter what it was. And over the years, she's pretty much just eaten what I've killed in terms of red meat. And she has become a connoisseur of what cut is this? Is this an eye of round? Well, off of what? A mule deer? Off an elk? Off a, are we talking moose here? Because elk is my favorite. She's become a connoisseur of quality meats. And if I screw up the butchering, she lets me know about it. She absolutely lets me know about it. So if it has freezer burn or whatever, she's become a critic. And so,
well, Ben, we've made our meat into tofu. We've made our meat. Everyone's like so into. I think a lot of the inflammation that we have in the U.S. Everybody's pounding Tums after almost every meal, right? You realize that most people are, having to suppress this really strong like autoimmune revulsion against our food. Why? Because we're pounding it with like a cocktail of canola oil, sugar, and soy. Well, there's like the ultimate inflammatory trifecta. Why do we have to put that on all of our meat? Because it tastes like tofu. It doesn't taste like anything. And that's like, I think what your wife picked up on is like when you actually when you appreciate meat that tastes like meat, all of a sudden everything's different, right? Like all of a sudden your need for this, and by the way, you're more in tune with your secondary satiety characteristics as well. Your secondary satiety is like your superpowers as a animal, right? Where you also eat, you don't just eat for calories and fat, but you eat for micronutrients, you eat for things that are going to heal you, you eat for antioxidants, right? We all have that capability in our bodies to eat for those things. There's lots of good research about people and animals, not just eating for calories, but part of the reason we like overeat Doritos, right, is that it's a nutritional wasteland, right? So when we start to like re-educate our palates to pay attention to flavor, we actually activate the superpower of secondary satiety characteristics where we're eating for more than just calories and fat. And I think that's also a big part of the kind of like obesity and overeating puzzle, right? Is getting people back to eating something that's real flavor. It's the same thing as like with vegetables. If you're eating hothouse tomatoes, you sure as hell are going to want some ranch dressing on it, But if you get something, you grow a tomato in your garden this summer, you're just going to want some salt and you're stoked. It's good,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that comes down to like a proximity to what you're eating and an understanding of what it is, where it came from and all those things. So you guys think about supply chain, obviously, in your business. That's obvious. Do you think about how the end consumer, obviously we talk about how it tastes, but what about proximity? What about story? People want to know where their food comes from, but they're also not going to come to your regenerative farm and slaughter a cow with you. So how do you guys think about proximity in terms of the end consumer and how they feel about their connection to the food?
I am radically transparent in our branding and our messaging. I really drive that part of the business. And my, it's in everything that I do. I mean, I was actually shut down from my PR firm. I tried to put a live stream into our slaughterhouse when the ag gag law that happened where they said you couldn't film. It's like, I was like, you know what, bite me. And I was like doing it and my PR firm was like, you got it. No. But it's like, I actually think now I could do it. That was like in the very early days. I think that happened in 2013 or 14. But like I tell my daughter, we kill animals for a living. I would tell my son too, but he's really small. But I try to be very clear about the fact that we raise animals to process them and we sell their meat. And it's like every aspect of what we do is about that, right? So the people, I remember, hearing somebody telling me about how squeamish it made them to see food that looked like an animal, like seeing, like, let's say a chicken foot in a case or a pig's head in a butcher case, right? And my response was like, you should be more terrified of square ham, right? In terms of your safety and like really being rational, a pig's head shouldn't disgust anybody. A square piece of meat should freak you out, right? Or meat that doesn't smell like meat, or a chicken nugget that's shaped like a dinosaur. Run, don't walk, right? And instead, we've gone we got it kind of ass backwards, where we are now saying, oh, wait, it's the meat is perfectly square. The ham smells kind of like, like salty water. The chicken is pale and looks like it might be, like a piece of tofu. This is great. We feel confident about this, but that's actually just following the agro-industrial script of what people want us to do and how they want us to behave around it, right? So I think getting people to embrace the fact that these are animals and embrace it. Now, I've also learned I did stupid things when I started this company. I used to have pig's head in cases, and then we get picked up by PETA and people get grossed out. We used to do more kind of playful stuff about that, but and I still have it now, like on Instagram and Facebook when we do butchering videos and stuff, like it gets blocked or sensitive content, we get flagged and stuff. But it's important to understand that integrity. It's radical transparency. The meat industry has convinced us, the mainstream meat industry has convinced us, like, trust us, we got this. And I say, you totally don't have this. You're making people sick, you're putting animals in torture, and you're producing food that tastes like garbage. So, just you can just step aside. Like, if you want something different, you're going to need to learn the whole process or not. You can, but if you're interested, we've got it all there for you. It's like there's an appetite for it. It's less cute than seeing somebody like, snip Brussels sprouts in Santa Cruz, California, or whatever, like the veggie version of this that happened in the 70s. But it's an education that needs to happen,
Yeah, I love that, man. I love it on a lot of levels. Because when you're talking about you should be scared of a square piece of meat. I've butchered a lot of animals in my time. I've never, unless I made it so, I've never seen a muscle on an animal that came looking like a piece of Spam. I've never seen it.
Oh my goodness, yeah, exactly. And you see people saying like, I'm going to pound a package of square turkey slices and it's like and that feels clean and safe, but that's that. The thing is when I don't condemn that. I was, when I talk to our customers or our influencers or people, like, I get this sense, people say to me, oh, I'm so afraid to eat heart. And am I just a wuss? And no, you've been, billions of dollars have been spent to educate you to be afraid of this. Billions of dollars have been spent to educate you to not touch a chicken and to be okay with it smelling weird. This has been a public education campaign that's in the industry of, in interest of big industry. And they've spent a lot of the money to put us in this particular spot. And so here we are now. And like, let's not like beat ourselves up for it, but let's recognize it, that it's like, it's the same thing as like what happened with Americans deciding that eating a big bowl of hyper processed grain at first thing in the morning was a great idea, right? That wasn't folk wisdom. In America, we used to eat protein and fat for breakfast. Right? We actually culturally used to fast until like 10 or 11 a.m. And then we would eat something that was probably like 50% fat, right? Eggs and bacon cooked in fat. So in animal fat. So to change us from that population in the 1930s to a population by the 1950s was rejecting that food in favor of highly processed, basically carbs and sugars. Like that took a ton of education. And so now we're starting to unwind that, right? But we've seen this cultural shift towards people saying, oh, eggs aren't going to kill me. People bragging about eating, bacon again, that kind of thing. But so, like, keep in mind, we've seen this in other industries as well, where certain things that were considered, like for generations were healthy and felt good. People invested money to get us to think about it in a different light, and it takes a couple decades to unwind it and return to some normalcy.
Yeah. But we talk about this a lot here in terms of animals that we kill on our own. That it's once you start to understand the transformation process to get it to that thing you're comfortable with, it's a bit of a mind fuck. It's a bit of you become really connected to the transformation of a dead deer to a vacuum sealed, sliced lunch meat that we create here at my house. We talk about that a lot. We talk about how even just the slicing of the lunch meat sometimes can get a little bloody, a little bit messy, but the transformation process of understanding how that vac sealed lunch meat came to be in your fridge is huge, and how it looked, how dirty, how messy, how hairy in some extent it was, or maybe shouldn't have been, but that transformation is huge. And I think if companies like yours can continue to say, like, we're going to show you each step of the transformation as much as we possibly can. I love the idea of live streaming a slaughterhouse. I mean, I don't love it from optics level, but I love it because people need to get proximity to this any way that they can.
Yeah, I appreciate your vote. I do think my PR firm was correct in telling me not to do it.
I mean, I think, probably.
Probably. Who knows? But I mean, it's just that question of, and I don't believe that, for me, I'm not a hunter. I love cooking game. I cook a lot of it when I can get it. I'm not drawn to hunting, but I love being friends with hunters and helping them make sausages and cook their food, right? But I'm not comfortable with killing animals. I don't think this thing of like, oh, if you're going to eat meat, you have to be able to kill it. That to me, like, I'm a woman. I don't think genetically I have as much of a killing drive, right? But like, so when I go to a slaughter, I built the damn thing, like I know what I do there. When I go on the floor, I still get emotional when I see animals being killed. And I don't feel like a wimp saying that. And I don't think I shouldn't eat meat because of that. It's okay to outsource these things. I think in a traditional society, I wouldn't have been doing that anyways, But it's not like I think, oh God, you got to like stare the trauma in the face to be able to deserve to eat it. But I do think you need to understand, and that's like the language I use. It's like, we raise and kill animals. Like that's what we do. And we do it in a way that's as compassionate and awesome as possible. But the nitty gritty of it is what it is. And I don't think we need to mask that in our marketing or in our language.
Yeah. And I love that because that's what's happening to us over time. We're being told that the complex emotions that come with killing and eating something don't matter anymore because it's not an animal anymore. It's a cutlet or it's a piece of Spam. It's no longer an animal. It's something that we've processed and distilled and handed to you, neatly wrapped and looking beautiful. And like all those emotions and the complexity of what you just described of your own way of thinking about killing animals is important for everybody to go through, but we've been told that we're not supposed to go through it because that would probably lead to less people buying stuff, at store-bought meat. That's probably what it would lead to. So I feel like there's an industrial complex that is hell-bent on us not having this conversation, one, and two, not exploring our own emotions around eating things that had to die so we could live.
But it's like it's kind of like I think that a lot of vegetarians and vegans are motivated by this, like, oh, it's an awful system, so I'm just gonna, disengage, right? And it's actually kind of understandable. It's like if you can't, I mean, it's an industrial, like it's an awful system. Animals are raised in torture, they die in torture, and do you know that like something over 40% of meat in America goes into waste? Like goes into the waste stream. So it's like, oh, we raise them in torture, we kill them in torture, and then we throw, almost half of them away. And so I think a lot of anti-meat activism is motivated by people just saying, I wholeheartedly reject that system. And I get it. So my option is to say, well, instead of just breaking up with it, why don't you just find something that you can feel better about?
Yeah. And also, I each time we have this conversation, people write in, people that are part of large-scale farms or agribusiness write in and say we're using a straw man theory in terms of big ag and big animal ag and factory farming, things like that. That there's certainly shades of gray. There's certainly nuance. There's certainly ethics and treatments of animals in large-scale pork production and large-scale chicken production. There are groups that are trying to figure this out, much like you are. Absolutely. So I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I hear that. I hear that, and I think it's almost that the system is so large and entrenched that it can't change fast enough. That's where I'm getting the space to sprint, right?
Yeah.
It's not that it's not gonna change. It'll break or it'll change, right? But it's not going to be able to pivot hard enough, fast enough, just because of the size. So that's how disruptors happen. That's what happen. That's where disruption comes from, right? And so I'm being given an opportunity for disruption.
Yeah, and as I have explored the plant-based meats and looked into that kind of thing and really talked about it on the show, I feel as though, and I feel like that's obvious in the way that those folks answer questions and present themselves. There's a good faith and a bad faith way of producing meat for people to eat, and really fake meat, meat substitutes. it seems like you're engaged in a very good faith activity. So how much have you thought about, Impossible Meats and all the other, I feel like there's so many of them now, I can't keep track, Beyond Burger and things like that, and where they've ended up in terms of fast food, and we've seen them in Chipotle and Burger King and things like that.
I was initially more concerned about Impossibles when they were going after more of like the high-end chef and trying to position themselves as a premium product. But now I don't think that somebody's going to invite you to their home to enjoy something that you can get on the menu at Burger King, right? So from a positioning perspective, they've taken themselves so far out of the premium discussion, right? I mean, can you imagine? It's like, oh, come to my house. I got these same burgers that they serve at Burger King. Like that would be almost like an offense, right? There's just a positioning question where I don't think my products are more for the home cook. They're really not in my corner of the pool. And broadly, I see their actual, and the reason they're doing that, by the way, is that they've raised so much money and they lose so much on every single product. They're just like swimming as hard as they can to get some volume, right? So it wasn't like they didn't want to do that chef message, right? They started with that chef message and they didn't get enough volume fast enough, right? So with that sort of didn't work. So they had to go to and pivot to another space. The other thing, I'm thankful for the what is it, close to $1 billion that those two companies, the biggest two players, have deployed between the two of them in educating people about just how bad CAFOs are. Now, I'm not going to say that every Impossible Food graphic I've seen about Big Ag is correct, right? But broadly, I think that there's a public education and awareness around confinement meat operations that's just so heightened, and it's in good part thanks to those operators, right? They've done a lot for me, I don't agree with the idea of we're going to rename this, make them spell it MYEET or something. It's sort of like that to me is kind of fighting the last war. I don't think that a rebrand is the way to do this, or to force them to not call it meat doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think it's like, they're so obviously a different product. It's just not, it's not something that occurs to me as a competitor to me.
Yeah. Were you ever surprised at how quickly it became acceptable in what we'll call the mainstream? Commercial
no, you spend $1 billion on something, you can get people to drink their own urine if you spend $1 billion on it. I mean, literally, you and me could do that in 6 months. We could have America drinking its own urine with how much those guys spent.
Yeah, and again, that from talking to those folks to being inside, to being inside their buildings and looking at things and reading about them, it feels to me like, and at some level, it's very important to talk about. What is it that accelerated them? And it's the money and the Silicon Valley investment and the fact that they have a proprietary technology to create this stuff. And it's brand
Silicon
new.
Valley, what they did is they found a way to create a food product that could behave in the same hockey stick that they were accustomed to, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the miracle of what those guys did. It's like my operations, if I go talk to a Silicon Valley, I have the benefit of having had very patient capital behind my company. That's why we're here today, right? But that's something that not many regenerative farms have. And the reason why it's difficult for people in my space historically to get capital is that we don't offer quick returns and we're not very quickly scalable, right? So those guys figured out how to offer something that kind of met many of the parameters of the type of investment that people were looking for, right?
Yeah.
So they created a food product that financially, at least hypothetically, behaves exactly like Silicon Valley wants, right? And that's very, very appealing. You go to me and I'm like, yeah, talk to me in 30 years, right? Right? Unfortunately, we have a longer horizon,
Yeah, it's good for you to hear you say patient capital and to think about the business side of this, because it's always a business, right? And food as a business is complicated because you have to make profits. You've got to streamline, and I think that's probably how. I don't know. Probably it is how we got to where we are today, and to what we're so used to. So, how does that work? How can you look down the road and say, like, we are where we want to be today, but we are going to slowly and let's say, openly move towards where this business needs to be? Because you said a couple of times, we're not going to be a huge company. We may not go public. We may, Is that how you feel it has to be?
That's a great question. I think that, could there be a fast growing regenerative operation? Yes, probably now that there's more of a substrate of medium sized farms that are kind of toggling towards this. But broadly, the expectations for capital today don't align with long term agricultural plays. Right. And that's like where you think about short term mentality characterizes many aspects of agriculture today, where you're looking at, tilling the soil every year, disrupting the root systems. Carbon is sequestered. Is let out of the earth through that tilling. So you're looking at systems that rely in their fundamental thing on looking at a 1 year horizon for a return in terms of crops. Right. So that's the type of thing that I think people don't realize, that implicit in conventional agriculture is a short-term 1 year cycle. With regenerative agriculture, every day you're making short-term trade-offs. We could get a hell of a lot more, alfalfa out of a field if we were to till it for 1 or 2 years, right? And then we'd become pretty dependent on a cycle of fertilizers, and it'd get more costly, and there's a bunch of different things that happen and change, right? But every year, I'm going to just ballpark, it's like a 30 to 40% haircut against potential productivity by pursuing. There's a huge trade-off with efficiency and high output production with the way that we choose to farm.
Yeah, that's a great point, and a point that we've made in the past that needs to be made is that the reason that we started tilling the soil and the reason we started injecting it with chemicals is because we needed things to grow faster to supply our need for these products. And then we ended up with, especially on the agriculture side, the plant ag side, monocultures, millions of acres of monocultures that do not promote the type of habitat wild animals or domestic animals need to thrive. And that's one thing I want to talk to you, see how you think about it from both, just a personal level and a business level, is just land use. How do you guys, when you're running regenerative agri farms, what do you think about when this scales? Because I've hunted a place called Rome Ranch down in Texas, where they're running bison. It's a regenerative agriculture basis for what they do, but they've got a lot of deer. They've got a lot of axis deer. They got a lot of whitetails. They've got a lot of turkeys. They've got a lot of quail. It's a great place to go and hunt, and it's also a regenerative farm, and those things seem to kind of line up. So how much have you thought about land use in terms of, both just as a personal philosophy and then as the business of Belcampo?
We have the potential in the United States to utilize livestock to be a positive player in the environment in many, many areas of the U.S. Right here in California, we see this with the fire management issues we have. Were we to manage land like we used to, at the turn of the century, the last century in California, we would be using ruminants to clear out underbrush, right? Mimicking the natural massive amounts of tule, elk, and deer, and all those different animals we used to have endemic in our environment here in California, right? So we have a opportunity to use livestock as a tool for increasing productivity and increasing land output throughout the U.S. Right? We don't do that because we have this idea of like there's a pristine, beautiful wild environment that must be absent of animals, right? That's our thinking. It's like we are absent of animals. Like that's the way that we imagine in our mind's eye that nature is. It's like without animals. If we're going to preserve something, we're taking everything out. But these systems evolved in concert with animals, right? And the systems evolved with animals as a natural part of how the soils were conserved, how biodiversity was cultivated. That's part of this system. So of course we're up a creek. Of course we are. Like we took one major element. It's like we took water out of the garden. Of course it's not going to work. You can't just take one thing like that out. That's so crucial.
Yeah, it's good to hear, the thought process, and one of the things that's impressed me with almost everyone that I come into contact with that knows anything about regenerative agriculture and is using it to some end, whether it's commercially or just on their own, has a deeper understanding of that connectivity and a deeper understanding, number one, of soil as the bedrock of all that we do and everything that we eat, all the animals that people are consuming that you guys sell are eating, I would imagine, and you can talk about this about your farms, eating what they're meant to eat, right? They're eating plants grown in a healthy soil. And so can you talk about the soil part of what you guys do and how that gets all the way to, the butcher's block and then all the way to the retail store?
Well, the interesting trend in all of our food right now, and the reason that we see such a boom in the supplements industry, is that a lot of our food today is nutritionally bereft, right? It has far less nutrients. And this is like, even, you see this like in our eggs, right? A free range Belcampo eggs has 3 times the protein that a caged factory battery farmed egg does. 3 times, same amount of calories. I actually don't know the math of what the other calories come from, but 3 times the protein, right? So just the, question of like forced molting and really, this high production that's forced on these animals, because of what they do with, the factory chickens is put them into starvation, and females of every species, actually, when you're starved, you become hyper fertile and then you become infertile because your body kind of gives it one last go. So the way they do that in chickens is you starve them, they push out a bunch of eggs, and then they give them food again, and they starve them again. So those eggs, though, are lower quality. That's an extreme example I give you to kind of present, an extreme example that illustrates the case, right? The other things that happen that are more subtle, carbon in soil is crucial to micronutrient capturing plants. So you can't have micronutrient rich. This is why our broccoli is less satiating and our spinach doesn't have all the same micronutrients. So some of these great studies you can read about, nutrient analysis of vegetables and meats in the 1950s compared to today. And the trend line is just down, down, down. It's something like 30 times the vitamin C in an orange that there used to be, 1/30th of it, right? So there's this huge like decline in the nutritional balance of all of our products. Now, the carbon as part of that is because carbon supports micronutrient extraction from the soil, and then the soil that has more carbon has more micronutrients. So it's like they can get out of the soil, and then there's more of it in there to begin with, and then that ends up in the plants, and that ends up in the products. In our, the way that we see that in our products today, and the kind of like end difference, it's complex because these are unfortunately not things that are tracked. The RDA panel on a jar of something doesn't, that's like 1% of the picture, right, of the micronutrient profile. What I hear and what I observe is just greater satiety. People eat less of it. I think you probably feel that with game too, right, Ben?
Oh,
Do you
yeah,
notice that?
absolutely.
Like people can kill a 64-ounce corn-fed ribeye, but it's like, try to eat 64 ounces of elk. You gotta be kidding me. Right? Like it's very satiating. And that's not because of the calories. It actually has less calories, but it's got the other stuff that your body's like, ooh, I'm getting all my nutrients. I can stop eating now. Right? So that's very functional of your body to kind of have that feedback loop for you. And then the other thing that's interesting is when you let animals forage naturally, they naturally gravitate to a lot of different types of forage. There's a beautiful study about goats that shows that when they are suffering, they would induce E. coli in goats. And then those goats would naturally go and find these very strong bitter herbs that are a natural antioxidant or antiparasitic, right? That would then clear them of that disease. So there's examples of animals just, so there's a nice story there in terms of like the ability to heal ourselves and probably some through lines to what we as humans potentially can do as well with our own health. But also you have an animal that's eating a wide diversity of foods. And as a result, that's another part of the reason why the micronutrient load is so much higher. It's the diversity of the diet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I look forward to a world. I think this is we're headed this way if we keep, folks like you keep doing what you're doing, is that, we went through a time where there was kind of a small scale, I would say, revolt against the factory farming industry and how meat was being produced. And then we started to see labels like you guys have, which is grass-fed, certified organic. And then when animal ethics started to come around, then it became certified humane. And these labels have become part of our culture. And when people are looking for a fast follow, is this good or bad? They go and they look for this terminology. And I'm looking forward to a world where regenerative agriculture, or just the term regenerative, means as much as organic, or means as much as humane, or some of these other things that that people look for on the shelves. I know you guys have all of those things built into what you do. Have you thought about this terminology and how people kind of make, sometimes snap judgments, or at least look for at the grocery store, at the retail counter, look for something that seems like it has the qualities that we've pushed as a society of good food?
I think the traction that consumers have to the word free range and cage free is a good sign. Those terms don't actually mean very much anymore. They were kind of defanged by industry, right? And I of course, worry that the same thing could happen to regenerative. But yeah, broadly, labels are very important. And I really have come to embrace my organic certification, for example. And a lot of people say, well, I'm organic, but I'm not certified. And I'm like, well, that's like telling the IRS, like, I pay my taxes, I just don't file my 1040. It's like, come on, like it's and this idea of like organic is incredibly costly. It's like, I actually know I run multiple organic farms, and it's like $2,000 a year. It's not that expensive. So just, I just encourage your listeners and people, if you hear the things like, oh, we're organic, but it's too much paperwork. It's like, yeah, that's actually all the paperwork that organic does as an operator, I'd say, has all been good for our diligence and rigor. That said, we also have many non-organic animals that are not in our program for really kind of ethical reasons. For example, we have a type of barley that grows wild on our farms. It's a bearded barley. It's got like these long hairs on it. Those hairs are very sharp. Our calves at times will get into a big patch of that and scratch their eyeballs. If the weather's right and whatever else is happening, they'll get pink eye. We can have a pink eye outbreak. And if we want to keep those animals in organic, we cannot give them an antibiotic for pink eye. We choose, for compassion reasons, right? And also business reasons, because those animals will be stressed and malnourished for months, right? So it's ethically complex and dubious business decision to let them have this disease, right? So we'll give them the antibiotic, and they will get better immediately, and they will never be organic, right? So I can say organic has its complexities, because do I think that one eye drop in each eye of one calf in one day of its life merits losing something that guy can charge a premium 30% for, when every other day is still freaking expensive? Does that make sense to me? It's like, no, that's annoying. But I give that as an example of the real reason why many farmers don't want to do organic. They say it's like, it's the paperwork or it's the fees. It's really because it holds you to a rigor around disclosure that can be frustrating and doesn't always feel rational, right? Does that make sense? It's like that sucks. It's a bummer. It's like, come on, I should be able to charge $8.99 instead of it's $4.99. But that animal lived for like 800 days, and all that time it was, every one of those days, if that one day was organic. And so was its mom when it was in, gestating, right? So that's the real reason why. But I think those labels are important. And I think, I now see the labels as like, it's a proxy for knowing your farmer. The best thing is to hunt it yourself or to buy it directly from somebody. And a lot of, your listeners that are hunters, it's like you can buy whole beef and whole pigs the same way you can, stock a whole elk or a whole deer in your freezer, right? So that's the best option, is just to buy direct and know that farmer. And in that case, if that guy's not organic, but you've been to his ranch and you've talked to his kids and you get a great sense of what he does and his integrity in the world or her integrity in the world, awesome. Do it. Trust your judgment, not the label, right? Don't walk away from that farm gate being like, nope, you're not certified humane, right? If you've observed that the practices are there, because for very small operations, a lot of times even that $2,000 is something that can tip somebody over the edge, right? So right. There's a real, but those, when you don't have that mano a mano personal relationship, those certifications are a proxy, and they're an important proxy. So I think that increasingly, regenerative certification is going to be something that people are going to want to see. The problem in all of this, right, is the cost load and the premium perception. I struggle with my beef operation is somewhere between 3 and 5 times as expensive for one of our beef to produce compared to conventional operation, but I can charge like double, right? So there's my incremental ability. So the way that I recoup that, right? So if you go to a grocery store and you were to see, like whatever Bob's feedlot beef for sale for $3.99 a pound, and then there's Belcampo and it's like $9.99 a pound or $12.99 a pound. So that's already a big premium. But the actual cost, it should be more like, like that they're at $3.99 and I'm at $15, right? If I actually look at the real costs of raising them. So the reason that we're able to recoup that is that we're, with our grocery store partners, for example, we distribute direct, so we don't work through distributors. So we save a couple percentage points there. We don't spend as much on like what's called trade spend or advertising in store. And that allows us to recoup a little bit. So we capture margin in other ways. How scalable is that in the long term? So the challenge is like all these additional levels of certification and what's the premium that can command? So I'd say regenerative has a chance as a certification if it can legitimately command a real premium that captures the incremental cost of that style of production, right? It's really math, like everything.
Yeah, like everything. Yeah, I mean, a lot to cover in there. But I do think that these terms, free range is a real good example of one. That these terms, the terms are used to manipulate us in the same way that we're being manipulated on a fast food scale. That we're being commercialized into a burger at Burger King. Free range, when it became a term that people at Whole Foods really they had to have it if they were going to shop at Whole Foods and they were going to buy meat. Free range had to be there. It's then when the demand grows, then the industry wants to then manipulate that term. So if you look at chicken and the way that producers can get around the term free range, I mean, chicken could still be in a warehouse in relatively close quarters and still get the free range label. Morgan Spurlock has a really good documentary from years ago about this exact thing that lays this out. And so it's just another, like, the proximity ethic and all this just comes back to no matter what, that label, while important for people that aren't going to go to the farmer's market every day, that aren't going to kill their own elk, while important is manipulatable, maybe not easily manipulated. You know more than I about that term, but it can be manipulated, has been manipulated, and at some level, at this point is watered down, right?
Absolutely. I mean, free range means that the animals have access to the outdoors. What that means practically is that there'll be a Quonset hut that's, say, 80 feet long, and there'll be a door that's 18 inches wide on one side of that Quonset hut. And that door will open up onto a small run that's like, a couple feet wide and a couple feet long, where the animals hypothetically can go outside. And these animals are still like debaked and inside and eating a slurry and under huge stress, right? So, the problem is that when you let animals really live outside and be natural and relaxed, they don't gain weight very fast, right? And so the real problem with free range is that it's fundamentally, again, when I said earlier in the conversation, we're willfully anti-efficient. That's what I'm talking about. Because think about it for you and me. It's like, think about the times in your life when you were inside all the time, didn't get natural sunlight, ate the same thing. I mean, we kind of remember like in college and stuff, it's like those are the times you gain weight under a huge amount of stress. So the weight gain in chickens in particular, as we're talking about free range, it's really relevant to chickens and to poultry. That weight gain in poultry is as tied to cortisol and in confinement as it is to anything specific in its feed. In the case of chickens, for example, we feed our chickens, like on paper, something very similar to what Tyson feeds them, right? Which is, kind of a mix of corn and barley and wheat. I mean, Tyson probably uses corn and soy. We use a little bit of corn and other grains, but let's say directionally it's the same thing. It's grain based instead of the legumes in it. And we raise exactly the same breed for part of our chickens, a Cornish cross. And so does Tyson. But Tyson, it takes them 2.5 weeks to come to about 3 pounds. And at Belcampo, it takes 8 to 10 weeks. And what's the difference? It's confinement. So when we talk about whether or not free range animals are, whether or not that's a legitimate term or not, it's absolutely an efficiency question. Right? It's about whether or not they are, by getting access to the outdoors, they're going to gain weight much more slowly. And so there's a really good reason why there's been a workaround, right? Which is that it's a lot more expensive to do it that way, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to pass that cost on to consumers.
Yeah. That the Morgan Spurlock documentary I mentioned is called Super Size Me 2, I think, and he it's pretty funny. He creates his own restaurant called Holy Chicken, and all the marketing he calls authentically honest, which I think he's doing this for ironic purposes, of course, but he's got all of the actual terms there, what they mean, what he had to do to get them. And some of the scenes with the marketing firms in that film are hilarious, man. Hilarious. And so you guys are you're not doing it for a gag like he is, although a poignant one. But you guys are trying to, in some ways, do the same thing he's doing by tearing down the walls of marketing fluff and, not misinformation, but certainly the twisting of information.
I will not use the word natural on any of my products. I will not use the word free range, and I will not use the word cage free. Those are all meaningless words.
Yep.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's like my kind of willful disobedience on those fronts, right? I use the word pastured. I use the word like outdoor. We use other words, right? But in particular, the word natural is abhorrent. That's a word that's been completely co-opted. And keep in mind too, Ben, when I use any word on my packages in my grocery products, like let's say the word regenerative, I have to document to the USDA why exactly we're regenerative. So in that case, I have my independent third-party analysis from the Soil Carbon Coalition. We send that to them and we say, here's our documentation. We have a discussion with them. So when a company like Tyson uses the word natural, there's an implicit co-option of that word. It's not just like they put it on and nobody corrects them. No, they've gone to the USDA and they've made a case for why it's natural. And it's probably like these chickens have two legs. I don't know what about the Tyson product is natural, right? But they're able to make a case. And then at that point, the bar is lowered and that becomes the standard for the use of that word.
Yeah, they are betting on the fact that we're not going to look into it. They're betting on the fact that millions and millions of Americans aren't going to give a shit beyond just these terms that make us feel
also,
good.
Like antibiotic free. They say there's no antibiotics unless the animals are sick. That's what antibiotic free is defined as. Well, guess what? If you are a veterinarian working for Tyson, it's like how
all
often
the animals are sick.
All the animals, and you know what? It actually is legitimate because the conditions that they're in are so risky. They're so there's this really kind of chilling study from the Pew Charitable Trust about confinement animal systems and the impact on humans who work there and the animals that are there, and they show that if ventilation systems in one of those big Quonset hut factory farms goes down, that all humans and animals have to be vacated from inside within 9 minutes or they will die because of the air toxicity. 9 minutes. That's how long, like in a natural, if those animals if that didn't have that massive ventilation system going, how long you'd have to get the hell out of that building and get any animals out for their own protocols and their own information. So that's how bad it is in there, right? And that's why, you could say we have to prescribe antibiotics because otherwise they continually get sick. Well, of course they freaking do. Of course they do. It's like an environment that's so heavy in toxicity that when the fans break, everything dies in under 10 minutes.
Yeah, if that was your own house, if the air conditioning broke at the summertime, you're like, get out of here, we're all going to die.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine living in an environment, you're like, okay, kids, if the fans go out, we have to leave in 10 minutes or we're all dead. Like, of course you'd be like, and by the way, take tetracycline 8 times a day. Yeah,
I'm sorry that the walls are black, but it's just the way it is. So what are we going to do? Yeah. Totally. The other thing I always think of is that every single generation of modern humans, at least as we go through, we always look back a generation or two in the past and we either chuckle or marvel or are disgusted by some of the things we did, right? Smoking while pregnant being advertised in the 30s and 40s and on and on. There's some things that we know now that make what we were doing in the past look abhorrent on many, many levels, generation to generation.
Yeah, we always fall for technology. We always fall for technology. It's so really funny. I remember seeing these kind of these initial ads for the fake meats, and it was like, oh, it's so awesome. It's highly processed. It looks just like meat. And then my mind goes to asbestos and Olestra and there's I've seen this movie before and it never ends great. You know what I mean?
It's always the same.
It's always the same. It's like, hey, we figured out how to take this thing and just totally transform it, make it cheaper, and make it out of something that has absolutely no genetic, similarity to the original item, and it's all great, And it's like, these stories more typically end badly than well, right? But every day is a new day for us, right? Every day is a new day, and it's like we culturally embrace the new in America, and we embrace it with joy, and we're like, yes, problem solved, let's do this, but we did look at the track record for these highly aggressive innovations that don't have any long-term research or kind of impact studies on nutrition or wellness, right, for humans and for the planet, right? But there is that thing where it's like we tend to just sort of fall for the pitch every time and then get surprised that lo and behold the innovation actually has a bunch of unforeseen consequences.
Yeah.
And there really is no such thing as a free lunch. Think about that with the Lester. Do you remember that stuff where it was like this fat that you didn't, it was in the low fat diet and times, and you could eat all you want of it and you're never ever going to absorb any of the fat, and people, start like leaking fat out of their butts. It was disgusting. People were wearing diapers and eating chips though. And there are still people who are like, cool, I'll just wear my diapers and eat my chips. It's like, well, what else is going in your body in that time? What else is happening there? And these kind of innovations, we of course that's what's happening. You're not letting your digestive tract absorb any fat, or it's it's kind of like eating petroleum. It's not something you can physically break down. Of course there's these implications, and I think the same thing with we're making like a product that's biosimilar to meat and then putting it into our bodies, right? It's like same thing with genetically modified crops. It's like, of course things are going to go a little bit sideways. These are levels of fabrication that we don't really understand the long-term implications of, or even the near term, even like a year of eating that product, what's going to happen.
Yeah, I feel like those time frames are certainly shrinking for us, but my hope has always been we look back at this time generations from now. My grandkids will look back at this time and say, you guys are idiot. You guys are super smart, and thanks for doing, the internet was great. Appreciate that. But, it's really prescription opioids and fast food that you fucked us on. We're going to fix it up, but we don't appreciate, how quickly you guys fell into these traps. Do you see the future of meat somehow where we can look back at this and say, the grocery stores look different. The way people eat meat and think about meat and value animals looks different. And this was just a time of great discovery, but also just, great misinformation, and the fooling of America can somehow be just that when we look back on it, 50, 60 years from now.
Wow. That's
a deep one, eh?
Think about it. Oh my goodness. It's like, this is just the next level for me. I mean, I see it already in the past 8 years since I started this company. Okay. So I see it already in people's attitudes shifting. And a little bit of it is this kind of this like, Thermidorian reaction where we go from this super high, paranoia around fat. And now there's everybody on the carnivore diet or eating 80% of their calories from animal fat, which I think is probably might be healthy, might not be a great idea. Don't really know. Right. So we're in this moment where we're overcorrecting in the fringe, and there's going to be a recalibration towards the center. So the biggest challenge for me in thinking about what does that future look like is just broadly, what's our cultural prioritization of our time when it comes to food preparation? So if you look at the great developments that in the things that we've done with the fast food, less so with opioids, less my area of specialization, but we've decided that a bunch of things aren't worth it for us to do. We've decided that making broth and cutting up meat and making, doing anything kind of manual is not a good use of our time. And we prefer to do other things with our time. We spend a lot more time on our phones, right? We spend a lot more time absorbing information through different media. So there's a cultural shift. So I don't doubt that the health crisis is going to push us towards some really radical shifts in things, right? That's happening already. But then the question is like, what's going to be the crux, and what's the future generation approach to time and the role, then the responsibility we have to spend time on food as part of our basic health and wellness. That's what I see less of positive trends around. I do a little bit in younger people, getting excited about cooking again, but something around the understanding of that you're going to need to spend a little bit more time on this, but it's going to pay off for your entire life. And it can be part of like a meditative ritual and joy. That's a dot I'd love to connect for people of like, you have it because you hunt and you like to eat meat, but you don't hunt because you like to eat meat. You hunt because you like to get away and be out there in nature and have sort of something you're kind of, I imagine like goal oriented and like to be not just like going for a wander, but feel like you're doing something and have an achievement and a reward associated with that achievement when you're out there. right?
Yeah.
And so that hunting, it's like you're doing something that's really gratifying, but it also has purpose, and you're feeding your family, and so it scratches a lot of itches, right? And it helps you on a lot of different levels. So that's a really powerful set of gratifications right there. And it's not just about the food at that point, it's about satisfying on a lot of different levels. So I think, if we were able to look at what are some more of those examples, that would be really, really something that people could think about as a way to coach greater societal change. Right. So it's like not just seeing it as like bringing food to the table, but it's like for me as somebody who loves to cook, and who's somebody who like kind of struggle with this like idea that femininity and feminism now is like you have to reject the home a little bit is implicit, like, or that all these convenience foods are things that are going to kind of like save us from drudgery. And I don't love drudgery, but I really do enjoy the art and the thinking around planning my family's meals and organizing that and cooking really carefully and putting things away. And I also, I love the cooking seasonally, and I think there's a lot of health and taking care of my family's health in that. So there's a lot of meditative joy in the same way that for you in hunting that happens, right? Where you're like, okay, this isn't really just about what I'm doing, right? It's the act of doing it that's part of the joy. So for me on the culinary side, there's a lot of the gratification that's like the act of doing all those things is deeply satisfying and relaxing and makes me feel content. And it's not just about the food that I'm making or the caloric impact of that food. It's about the whole process of delivering that, right? It's a lot more implicit in that. And you're never going to get that from opening a freaking granola bar. You're just never going to get that, and that's where I think a lot of like emotional eating and overeating comes from, is that people are looking for more, right? And to me, it's like I'm more of an emotional cook than I am an emotional eater, right?
That's probably a good thing to promote. That's probably to be like, listen, if you're getting emotional and you're not feeling really good, go cook. Don't go to the fast food joint.
I had a really rough day yesterday. This is a true story. I had a really tough conversation, and I braised a leg of lamb, and I was just a beautiful piece of meat. I really thought about how I was going to do it. I, enjoyed the whole act, and my house smelled amazing. And it was like a healing process for me. It was a great way to kind of self-soothe, and gave me a chance while I was doing to think about that and think about what I'm going to do and react. And it was like claiming space. And, a lot of this stuff too, like think about it now in America. We don't go to church anymore. We don't have, face-to-face friendships. We don't have communities. It's like there's a lot of things that are kind of shredding around us. And so it's like a lot of this kind of, especially here in California, this like, people go to treat yoga like it's church, right? It's because they don't have church, and so what are the rituals and the routines that fill that space? And I think that culinary can be one of those things.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, I watched this. So, have you seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Yes, I did.
Like everyone have, right? It's a very compelling film. A lot of it really resonates with everybody that's staring at their phones a lot. But at the same time, I want to say, like, hey, guy, listen. When the one character that's on there is telling us, they're trying to addict you. They're using psyops on the American public to addict you to your phones. I'm like, yeah, get in line. Everyone else is too. In an attention economy, fast food wants your attention. They want to addict you to fast food. We want to be addicted to processed sugars. We want to be addicted to our phones. Everybody's trying to addict us to the thing that they have.
But it's also though, like, magazines never made money off of content and subscriptions.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. It's like, come on, guys, this isn't new. I think we're trying to vilify something. It's like, it's not exactly like blaming the printing presses for what's in the newspaper, but it's not that far off. It's like, this is just the new medium, And
we've been trying to do this. Yeah, we've been trying to to act like we've stumbled onto the attention economy as something that just happened when social media became. Maybe it's a more sophisticated version of that, but we've been doing that. Yeah, I'm sure when the TV came out, people were saying, "Oh, we're doomed. The television, it's gonna brainwash us all." But we get over those things only with the kind of conversations that you're having. And it's like, listen, people are trying to addict you to shitty food. They are trying to addict you to shitty food they can make money. That's what they're trying to do. They'll do anything to trick you into doing this. That's just how they roll. You have to, and I think maybe the modern dilemma is we're away from our families. A lot of people, especially, I would say California, but even here in Bozeman, Montana, people move away from their families to be in a better place or to find a job, and then they're alone, and the world is trying to addict them to everything. And that's maybe the modern struggle. where you're trying to fight against fast food, but you don't have a food culture. You can't go to your mom's house and she can't make you the casserole because she lives, a country away or states away.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today. Because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
No, there's that whole, that's where I just think when we've outsourced our food production to a couple big companies, right, everywhere in the world, which is what we've done. We've in that given up a lot of other kind of lateral forms of joy and gratification and didn't really account for all that. And I think, we now have like a pandemic of anxiety, right? Particularly among women. American women are like the most anxious on earth. And it's like, well, I think that there's a connection to then there's lots of kind of ritual soothing, caring things that we used to do in our culture that are just gone now and are not societally approved, right? And not things that we should be doing. And I agree that there was a ball and chain. Like, I'm very glad that I'm not washing, my clothes in the river, right? But it's like there's a happy medium where some of these things could have multiple levels of benefit for anxiety, for wellness, for stability, for ourselves emotionally, right?
Yeah, food. If we can get there with food, and I hope, I have some of that because of hunting, but I'm not all the way there. I have young kids, just like you have young kids, and sometimes it's hard to really drill down on that stuff, and you want it to go quickly. Dinner time needs to be stress-free and as quick as possible. So it's not bad to have like a butcher box or something every once in a while, but it's incrementally getting there. Hunting led me to gardening. Gardening and hunting has led me to this like search for a proximity ethic in my food, and then that's led me to regenerative agriculture and trying to understand the broader scale so that I can understand where I fit in. So all that's healthy, but also the emotional part that you described, I think, is something we've never touched on in this show before. But I think it's super important because, well, I guess maybe there's a question in there somewhere that, do you feel like consumers can feel emotionally connected to Belcampo meats because you're being honest in a way that other companies aren't, where they can sit down at their dinner table and be like, hey, guess what? Here's the story of this meat you're eating. Here's this leg of lamb, or here's this pork chop, and tell the story of your company and you and what you guys do, the same way as I tell the story of where I killed the antelope that we had for dinner last night.
What I feel like is I enable people to feel joy around something that they'd like to feel excited about, but they typically feel ashamed of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
that's what
powerful.
I think the magic of our brand is. It's like there's this thing where it's like, I mean, for me, I was a vegetarian for many years and I've never been less healthy, right? Than in that time, and overweight, and it was a terrible protocol for me personally. This was in my teens, like many young women. I was like, oh, it's bad for the planet, and stopped eating meat, and it was a train wreck. And then when I got back on meat, living in Europe, I then now I probably 60 to 70% of my calories on average are from animal protein and fat, minimum, right? And that's the diet that I really do great on. That just really works for me. But for people like me, or maybe a little bit less extreme than me, it's like there's this problem where you're like, God, like this food that was ancestrally extremely relevant for us really works great for me, but I feel kind of ashamed about it, right? Because of just the complexity of the choice. So what I see our consumers embracing is they're like, oh, I love this. It's great for my health. I feel fantastic when I eat this. And now I can share it in an uncomplicated way. And for many, I mean, obviously tons of Americans still making whatever they want and, shouting it from the rooftops, right? So I'm talking about a pretty niche audience, but that sense of being like, wow, I can be super proud about my choice for something that does really well for me is really empowering for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And to know that, like, we're all, I think the modern sense, our diets are imperfect in so many ways, even if you're like me, food conscious and want to be health conscious. I slip up all the time. I fall into the traps. People have cheat days in their diets. You fall into a trap where, like, I understand that those processed foods are out there. I understand sugars and stuff. I love a nice donut. I like a nice piece of pizza. And, those, just knowing that those things are out there. But if you can have a couple of days a week at least where you are doing, sharing that emotionality and the way that you're describing, that's a start. And it gets addicting after a while to have that connection.
Well, for me too, it's funny. Like I don't cook a massive meal every night. I do cook a lot. But then the other thing is, like, when I do have like more of a simple meal, I'm really stoked to have just like cheese and, like some olives or whatever it might be, like a bunch of nuts. Like, you also can get simpler when your cheats are happening too, right? Like there's a mentality around it where it's almost like for me, I'd much rather just eat a bunch of like Brazil nuts and a couple boiled eggs than eat a frozen TV dinner, but that looks like a square meal. Just rationally, that makes a lot more sense to me, right? I would never opt for a full meal that was frozen and prepackaged against just like kind of like an abundant raw food, whole food snack of some sort. But that mentality is something that I taught myself as an adult, right? I didn't necessarily grow up with that. But it was about my own kind of wellness and how I saw it. So there's a sense too where it's like, I think when you adopt that kind of mentality, you can still have cheats and still do, still eat those things that are indulgent and delicious to you. But like, there's also a way to frame kind of like every meal and food opportunity in that thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because there's essentially like a simplicity and an ease that comes from eating higher quality, minimally processed foods. Like everything actually does get easier. So you get a benefit for that higher price.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you're making roast chicken and you just throw some salt on it and stove and it's great and you're good to go. And everyone's like, what did you do to this chicken?
I like that you said that about last year. We just moved into a house and I didn't have a garden last year, but I got everything set up for next year. And there was some part of me that, as much as I love having elk in the freezer, man, did I miss a fresh tomato and like fresh cucumber and being able to look outside and see as I'm eating it and see where it came from too. So I like, I hope people can see that, some nice pink salt on an elk backstrap can feel the same as some fresh ground pepper on it, and some olive oil on a tomato or something like that. So all that stuff is connected in the emotion of what you're doing and the taste of the thing that you've cultivated. So I appreciate it. Well, I think everything you're saying, Anya, has made some connections for me, hopefully for the audience as well, in a way where we try to think about, the proximity to our food, but also what do we do on a mass scale? Because that's the generational question we're going to have to answer here, not only for ourselves and our own health, but for the environment, as you mentioned in the beginning. So,
well, I think hunters are leading the way too, like to get this to scale and to make this more broadly available, we need to open the doors around people eating more cuts of meat, being more responsible about wasting meat. And I guarantee it that you're more cautious about waste and leftovers on that elk backstrap that you have than you ever are from anything you bought from the store. Like when you have a sense of caution and creation and pride, you're going to be more careful about the entire utilization, right? So that's something that I think, that consciousness about the product is the first step. And that's why I actually feel great about charging a premium price for my product. Because I say, well, if nothing else, this gets people to be more cautious about waste, right? And more conscious about it going bad and maybe saying, hey, I'll just take those chicken bones from the roast and I'll throw them in a pot and I'll make some broth out of that. And getting more in it. That's by doing that, you're extracting more nutrition out of that carcass. You're taking more of that life force and turning it into nutrition, which is why we killed that animal to begin with, right? In the same way that when you hunt, you do that. So it's like, I think you've got in your audience and what you're doing, you've got the fundamentals of what it's going to take in terms of like a wisdom and understanding around animal utilization and extracting full nutrition from life. That's the kind of, we don't need all of that. We don't need people to be as like rad as you are on it, but like some of those steps, right, are what we need to do. And I also love that when you're hunting, you're trying different cuts, you're making braises, you're smoking. Many of the hunters that I know, it's like the first time they ever ground meat was because they were, trying to make, venison sausage or something, or summer sausage. So it's like, it's getting people down this pathway because they're like so damn proud of that animal they got. They want to make it into every single thing that they can eat year round. And that's part of the education as well. I mean, I definitely see hunters as part of this movement around regenerative and the progressive front on food.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that progressive food movement, I mean, I think I've always said that I think there's a value base that's starting to come up that you display, that a lot of the hunters that listen to this show display, vegans and vegetarians display it too. And every time I have a vegan on or an animal rights activist and we're supposed to argue, I just say like, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I want you to be on my team. But stop being such an asshole about it. Like let's understand that we all have an underlying value system that says we want to eat better, we want to understand where the food comes from, and we want to reject what's becoming the norm society, which is harmful industrial food production. Like we're all trying to do that in different ways. Stop telling me I'm bad because I eat meat, and let's just hug it out, and we'll everybody be fine. But what I'm excited about is this value system that's starting to come up, and you see it in regenerative, you see it in what you're doing, you see it in lots of places in our society. And if we could get everybody together and be like same team, we'd have a powerful force for not anti-meat, pro-meat, but just like pro proximity and pro understanding. I think that's definitely could happen if we can figure out how to talk the animal rights folks down off the ledge. Maybe that's a
I get
tangent.
it. We've made it easy for them to vilify meat. Like we have consumption patterns and production patterns that have made it easy for them to vilify meat. Right? That's true. It's like we've set ourselves up. We built the straw man, right? Like we did it. So it's almost like we set it up in a situation. It's almost like you have one bad relationship and then you decide you're a lesbian. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what's happened here. It's like, but it's so bad and it's so abusive. You're like, no, I'm done with men. So that's like what I feel like the voice of veganism right now is. And I kind of get it. I see that, and it's an emotional response. It's an emotional response. And it has to do with how bad the system is and how tragic and the treatment of animals is and how much empathy we feel for animals. And I also think because many people are very lonely right now in society, we tend to over-identify with and over-empathize with animals. I think that's kind of a cultural shift that's happened. There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of people without children, but with dog moms and stuff out there. And that's a beautiful sentiment, but it's also, a little bit, confusing to me that you can, the treatment. Anyways, there's like these people are still feeding their animals, typically dog food made from tortured animals. But there's some contrast in there. That doesn't really call into doubt on anything. But I'm saying we tend to anthropomorphize and over emotionalize animals right now in general. So that's part of the trend as well. So it's like we got this kind of, conflicted little cocktail of things going on. And when that's all together, it creates a really dangerous level of like emotionality around this issue. And that's how I call it. It's an emotional issue, and it really shouldn't be,
Yeah, and it could be emotional if we didn't try to just simplify those emotions into like killing bad, not killing good. It could be if we were like, hey, listen, like you said earlier, it's not exactly a crazy notion to not want to go out and shoot an elk in the heart. Is it, in the modern sense?
Listen, I have no desire to kill any animals, but I know that for my health, it's crucial that I eat animals, right? So they don't have to be one and the same. And I also think too, speaking of health and for women too, it's like all these major like fertility issues and these women who can't get pregnant in their like late 20s and 30s. And a lot of that's related to the endocrine disruptors of the pesticides and things, but a lot of it's that we're not eating healthy meat and enough meat. One kind of crazy statistic that I've seen, this is from a guy out of UC Santa Barbara, is that, the performance on standardized IQ tests in the study, I think it's like 60 different countries, it's more highly correlated to the mother's bioavailability of healthy animal proteins in her diet than it is to the country economic index.
Wow.
Okay, so Ethiopia versus Sweden is important, but not as important as is mom eating meat. Like, think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. Why isn't that statistic getting blown up everywhere?
You'll have to excuse me. I have PTSD from all the think about that political ads that I heard over last year.
Oh my God. Yeah, sorry. But it's like that to me is like, you let that sit in. It's like you want a brainy kid. It's more important. I'm saying it's more important than like Guatemala versus USA. Are you eating healthy animal protein or not? Like that's huge, right? Yeah. And also, I just think the fertility, when as women, when we get pregnant and carry a baby, the bones of the baby start out as a collagen matrix. And then that calcifies. It's collagen. We get the collagen from our bodies, and then it gets replenished by animal collagen. This isn't just like politics. This is science. And for females that eat meat in early childhood and then cut out meat prepubescence, right? When they bear children later in life, there'll be essential amino acids that they give to their fetuses that they've been carrying in their bodies for sometimes upwards of 2 decades in anticipation of childbearing. That's how important. Whereas women who never have eaten meat in their entire lives don't pass those essential amino acids onto their babies. Like that's how important it is evolutionarily for women to eat meat. So because there's so many females who are vegans now. I'm like, oh my God, you're just like, you're doing a disservice to your body and to your children.
Yeah, you look at vitamin B12 and B6 and riboflavin, all the B complex vitamins that are in there, and just starting to look around at the science of meat and the sources of some of the complex vitamins that we need. It's like, man, this is important. I had a guy's been on this podcast and that I've known from the hunting industry who was dehydrating elk liver, grinding it up, and put it into tablets and taking it in tablets form. I'm like, man, you're an innovator. That's awesome. Never thought to do that. But again, to your point about hunters, I'm like, I'm probably going to do that now because I want everything from this animal that I can get. And I know that wolves and other predators devour the liver sometimes first.
Elk livers are big. They're like 5-6 pounds, right? How big are they?
Yeah, they're huge. Yeah, at least 5 or 6 pounds.
Yeah. I think maybe even like 10 pounds, right? I've heard because I think a cow liver is usually about 6 or 7 pounds. So elk, if they're big, must be bigger than that.
They're huge. Yeah, they're huge. I don't know weight wise, but when you pick one up, you're like, man, this is substantial. Same thing with an elk heart. You think, man, I could get about 6 fajita meals off this thing. This is how I think about it anymore. But those types of things are very transformative in terms of how we think about these things and how we value them. So. I think it's huge, and Anya, we'll wrap it up here. We could probably go for another couple of hours.
I'm
on
ready.
this
We
topic.
haven't even started talking about how to cook this stuff. We got to do this again. Talk about cooking.
We do.
I have lots of opinions about that.
you.
I have even more opinions about that than I do about regenerative
Well,
agriculture.
I know that you cook some elk for somebody told me that you cooked some elk for Donald Trump Jr. at some point recently.
I actually got meat from an elk he shot. I work with a journal called Field Ethos. You know that journal?
Yeah, I do.
They're awesome guys, and so I do a bit of culinary content for them in exchange for them sending me game.
That's a perfect exchange. I feel like we could probably work that out here.
I'm ready.
We got mountain goat, we got mountain lion, we got moose, we got all kinds of stuff on the Meat Eater team. We wouldn't be Meat Eater without that offering.
I'll make you guys sausages, no problem. But yeah, so I did. I really enjoyed cooking that, and I've gotten, since working with them, into a loop. It's cool for me because grass-fed and finished meat like we raise at Belcampo is real similar culinarily to elk and all their wild game. So I suspected that, but being able to play with product that they've been giving me has been really reinforced that. So I've had a lot of fun developing recipes and working with that product. I love cooking meat and learning from it. So it's been rad.
Yeah, well, next time we'll have to get into that and like how you feel grass-fed beef and elk, similar, dissimilar, all that stuff. Well, screw it. We ain't no time clock. Elk and grass-fed beef, similar, dissimilar, where you fall?
I think they're similar if you get a full finished grass-fed animal. So longer term on grass, you're going to get more of that kind of like the consistency of the beef. The elk is more slow growing even than beef, because keep in mind that elk have natural lean seasons as well, right? So, and an elk that you're shooting is probably minimum like 5 years old, right?
If I'm good, yeah.
Yeah, so they're whereas beef are going to, like our beef we slaughter at 26 months. So as a result, they're going to have more muscle fiber. It's going to be lean and dense. The other thing is elk are eating very, for grass-fed beef that's finished on pasture, it's being taken to pastures that are high bricks and high sugar content, so very mature grass towards the end of its life. And elk, not so much, right? You're going to have more exercise and slightly less sugar naturally in the grass that they're eating because of the seasonality of it. So because of that, you have even less intramuscular fat. So from a cooking perspective, what I think biggest tip for me is to get your hands on some beef tallow to cook elk in. That's been something that's really transformative, I think, is you can just use a piece of fat from like a ribeye or a New York, keep it in the freezer and use that on a hot pan to render it. And then cook the elk in that fat. So it's a very biosimilar fat that the flavors are really complementary. And I think elk is magnificent cooked to like a medium rare. That's my favorite way to do it. I love it as well. I love finishing it with olive oil, like a good amount of olive oil and like really high quality extra virgin oil and some good flaky salt. And that's kind of it. It's got such like a mushroomy complex flavor. Like I can finish it with like shiitake or, some like a mushroom kind of glaze I'll do occasionally. But I'm not a big fan of rubs and things because I really find it's just so complex and interesting and delicious. If I am going to use any rubs or sauces on it, it's going to be sugar-free, going to be vegetable-based. Like a chimichurri, so parsley, lemon, olive oil, straight olive oil, like a chopped herbs and a little bit of lemon peel. So it's going to be very kind of vegetal, acidic, and bright or mushroomy. I'm not going to want to do anything that's like soy or sugar-based, mostly for nutritional reasons, but also because I think the kind of the natural flavor palette of the elk is that like what you get in the best grass-fed meat, which is, I describe it as like the feeling, the smell when you walk through a forest in the fall.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It smells like kind of vegetal. It's like compost, but delicious, like kind of mushroomy, vegetal, clean, like that kind of like decaying pine cone and pine needle smell. That's the way that excellent, clean elk smells. And that's the way the best grass-fed meat smells too. And that has to do with diverse diets, right? So like to build on that flavor palette, I think if you cover it with like teriyaki, you're gonna just blanket that. So you got to find some things that like elevate that little unique kind of mushroomy, deep, like kind of, it's like an umami scent, and build that up.
Yeah. And I started to And this really came from my wife and becoming a critic of wild game, where I killed it, what it tastes like, the flavor profile, and starting to kind of see what a mule deer that lived on a sage flat tastes like, as opposed to what an elk that lives up here in the mountains of Montana might taste like, to a corn-fed, literally corn and soybean-fed whitetail from Iowa might taste like. Do you, in your line of work, I've always kind of guessed and posited, I've never really tested this on anybody, that gaminess is people will say it's because a lot of hunters don't know how to treat the meat. Yes, sure, that's, there's millions of hunters that aren't professional butchers. That's, I'm sure, part of it. But I think a larger part of it is the flavor profile of corn and grain that we're used to in our meats. Do you feel like that's something that contributes heavily to when somebody tastes or cooks up a piece of venison for the first time, or tastes it at a friend's house, that they always note this kind of gamey quality? I think gamey quality just means it wasn't corn and grain fed.
Well, I'll say in my experience, harvest and post-harvest handling is more important for gamey and livery flavors than diet.
Got it.
And then I'd say, but almost at the same level, the time in the life cycle is also very important. So in my experience with beef, gamey and livery flavors have to come really from adolescent animals too, so younger animals. So that's part of it. Like in some of these livery, gamey flavors and musky flavors that people taste in grass-fed beef, in my experience, are universally from animals that are like 18 months of age, which for grass-fed is mid-puberty, whereas for corn-fed, because they eat all that corn, they go through puberty faster and they get fat faster, but they're an adult faster sexually, right? So so you kept some mid-pubescents that are a little randy with the flavors there. The other thing to note is that all beef in confinement and in free range operations like mine are castrated, right? So all the secondary sexual pheromonal activity is a really important part of that too. So if you're hunting males or females, I mean, there's just way more pheromonally going on with wild animals than there ever is going to be in confinement animals, because they're naturally constantly pursuing mates, and that's all pheromonal, and that pheromone is what is musk.
Yep. And they got a lot. So I guess you're saying they got a lot going against them in terms of stacking up against what folks are used to tasting.
It seems a little bit like a luck of the draw too, Ben. Like I've tasted game that's off the charts gamey from excellent hunters, and I've tasted super clean stuff. And I think it's probably like, was he like chasing after a lady yesterday or no? There's probably just timing issues that are really beyond your control. So then the question is like, how do you manage for that? And as a cook, so if I was to land a really gamey animal, I'm going to be just handling it differently in terms of how I cook it. And the way I do it is I tend to cook that meat a little bit.
Can I ask you a question? Would you age? How would you deal with aging in that context? If you get an animal you knew that was rutting, are you going to age it a little bit more? Or are you going to let it hang in the garage for a couple more weeks? Is that something that would combat some of those things?
Absolutely not. I mean, based on my experience in beef, aging, it enhances everything, good and bad. So, and this may be my learning curve, and I may get jumped on by your listeners on this one, but my experience, like the better, the meat that's more, that's very mild, but with some subtle complexity, ages very well. Meat that starts out with a pronounced flavor, the aging is just going to simply make that more pronounced and unbalanced. And then additionally, there may be some benefits that may become more mild over time. I mean, there's certainly, though, in my experience with game, when you're aging, much of it has to do with the just natural breakdown to make it more tender. So I would think that has more to do with like animals that are going to just be extremely, extremely athletic or extremely, extremely lean. At that point, the benefits of the enzymatic breakdown of the protein structure may trump the increased kind of complexity of flavor that comes from that, right? And that may be the trade-off.
Yeah, that's one. I like the way you articulated that, because I agree with it. I certainly have. I've aged a lot of game for a long time, months on end, but I've gotten the best results with animals like axis deer, which have a mild but really flavorful profile. A lot of people will say of all the venison, axis deer is the best, partially in this case, I killed them in Hawaii, so it was the travel time plus where they lived and what they ate. I mean, the island of Lanai, where I was, is basically a botanical garden, and the biodiversity of their diet and everything, I think really. And then you tend to take a lot better care of something when you're traveling on a plane with it, and so I think all of that led me to do more aging with axis deer and get a way better result in terms of flavor and tenderness. But then I did a few of those with Texas whitetails and didn't have as good a result.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So
well, it's
so
like everything people think too. It's like in lots of different, like if you have a cheese that tastes funky, back to my cheese making, you can't, if you age it, it just gets funkier. If you make jam, people think, oh, you can make jam out of bruised fruit. Actually, jam out of bruised fruit will just have like a funky, musty flavor forever. So it's like it just enhances everything. The base materials are become the end result, right? So it just enhances everything that's already in it. In my experience.
No.
But,
all right.
sorry, but on the cooking techniques for gaminess, I would say go more to medium than a medium rare, because the combination of gaminess and the clammy texture can be really off-putting. Slightly gooey texture that you get from rare meat. And then I would do it really thin against the grain and really use it like in an after cooking marinade that's heavy on acid. So there's some, you can do like an escabeche direction with it. You could go, I do a lot of things with like sliced whole lemon, parsley, and olive oil. So if you're adding more of that acidity to it, it's going to counteract that gaminess.
Yeah, I have a commercial slicer at the house now, and I'll do a lot of some of the tougher cuts, whether it's a flank or, even a bottom or top round. Some of these cuts off an elk or a moose or a mule deer that I traditionally might have made steaks, like thinner cut steaks. I might have, sometimes I would have ground them. Other times I would have used them as roast. Now I smoke them on a pellet grill, slowly smoke them on a pellet grill with a nice rub of some kind, and then slice them thin on, really thin, like sandwich meat thin, and my family loves them. And so, like that treatment, and I should also say reverse searing them as well in some tallow or some olive oil or something. And my family loves it. And it kind of transforms every type of muscle group on an elk or deer into something that I can give that treatment to. Even an eye of round or a sirloin tip is a good example.
Well, you look at like in Asian cultures, like in Vietnam or Laos, Southeast Asia, there's every cut of meat, and they have a lot of very gamey buffalo, right? There's no cuts of meat. When you go to the meat shops there, it's like everything is basically just cut to the same size, cooked very well, and then sliced really thin against the grain. It's like the whole animal becomes that when you're dealing with that tough side. So that's and then the acid treatment afterwards, it sounds like you're doing smoking, which is another way to soften and overcome, because there's kind of two ways to approach muskiness. One is to overcome it with the flavor, like smoke can do that. Yep. And then the other one is to complement it with a flavor, which is what acid will do. And then there's some combinations of both of those. It tends to be a little bit much. So like the combination of those, one of the two is kind of which way you got to choose one of those routes when you're handling it culinarily afterwards. So chili is an example of just like mask the flavor, cover it up, right? And then the other style is like cut it very, very thin, add a bunch of different flavors to it, and make it into like a beef salad with herbs, etc. And then you can also kind of enhance it and meet it with an equally strong and powerful balanced flavor.
Well, those are great foundational. That's great foundational knowledge, because I think from that you can do a lot of things. Certainly for me, it's been learning, how to braise, like the elements of braising. I've been braising almost everything that I cook nowadays. I'm addicted to it, and then
so good.
For
and
me,
you get so much collagen. The really nice thing about braising is when you digest, when you're just eating striated muscle, you don't actually get all the nutrients that you could get out of that unless you're eating a lot of collagen as well, because collagen is actually rate limiting in your digestion of like glutathione from striated muscle. So if you eat a ton of striated muscle and you don't have enough collagen to complement that, you're actually not able to break down and fully and extract the nutritional load of that meat. Yeah. So it's extremely helpful. Kind of, it's a piece that's why braised meats. I try to eat like half of my meat is braised, even though it's tempting to just always stick to the hamburgers and stuff. It's a way, I think, from the health perspective, to really get a lot more value out of your nutritional load from that meat.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, as we're talking through this, I really do, I think back and like when I'm doing good, when I'm feeling good about family life, work life, all the balance that entails, I cook more and I do more creative things. And I do more things like, not creative, braising isn't creative, but I do more things where I'm experimenting and I'm free and I'm having fun with cooking and meat's always the center point of what we do. So that's how it manifests. But just as you were explaining that, for some reason, I started to think like, you know what, man, I've been cooking a good bit lately because I'm feeling good. But, I had a couple of months when the pandemic was going on where I was like just annoyed at everything and I wasn't cooking as much. So I guess that goes back to that emotional part of it that you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's that connection. Well, we're going to have to get you some meat to play around with.
I'm ready.
We got our crew is replete with with every type of wild game I can think of.
Hit me up. I'll do some content for you, do some recipes.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. We'll check out, where can they can find you on Instagram, but you probably prefer Belcampo, or where can people find
Belcampo Meat Co. on Instagram or belcampo.com. And then I am Anya Fernald. So just at my name, at Anya Fernald on Instagram. I do a lot of recipe content. And then at Belcampo, it's really about regenerative farming, a lot of recipes, products, etc. And then if you want to buy the meat, it's all on belcampo.com.
Yeah. And it gets it. Do you guys do, what kind of delivery do you do?
We do free shipping over $100. And our meat is actually 1-to-1 omega-3 to 6 ratio. For our beef, we just got that again. We get it independently verified every year. And that means it's basically nutritionally the same as wild game, which has that 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3s to 6s, compared to conventional beef is 1-to-30. So for every milligram of omega-3 fats that you get 30 of omega-6s, and omega-6s are the ones you want to avoid. So if you're looking for something that from a health perspective is pretty analogous to wild game, we've got it.
Beautiful. Well, that's a good place to end it. Although, like I said, we could probably go for about 5 hours on, especially.
Okay, I want to
subject.
get you at the farm too, my friend. We got to get you up there.
Let's go.
Let's
go.
fire cooking.
Hell yeah! Now that I've had COVID, I think I got the antibodies. So I can do whatever I want. I know. No.
Come on out. Yeah, you're free.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you, Anya, for coming on. A lot of good stuff in here. A lot of powerful stuff. In this couple of hours. So hopefully people will listen and listen again, and we'll have you back on as soon as we can.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
All right. Thanks. That's it. That's all. Another episode of this here program in the books. 153 to be exact. Thank you to Anya. And also, always, thanks to all of you for sticking and staying with us. Just want to keep this one very brief, but hopefully you have a really good holiday. You have a really good Thanksgiving. As an update on my health, and just to let you know, I've been talking to a lot of people about this lately. Everybody seems to want to know. And so I'm happy to share this with everyone. You guys all know how I got COVID. I got COVID on my Missouri Breaks hunting trip where we met Jolene. So if you want to hear that story, it's embedded in the last couple of episodes. But I had 2 weeks from about 2 Sundays ago until today, about 2 weeks and change of pretty awful COVID symptoms. Everything from fevers to body aches to sweats to, moments where it was tough to breathe, to weak lungs, to coughing, to headaches, to fatigue, to extreme fatigue in many moments. So, a lot of my family members, a lot of my friends, a lot of my coworkers just kind of wanted to know the dope on what happened to me, so they could get some perspective on this virus. And so there it is. I mean, it was just a little over 2 weeks of pretty horrible symptoms. That was not fun for me, but I'm out of the woods, hopefully, looking to take care of my family and keep them on the right track so we can all get back healthy and get back to whatever normalcy we can. But again, I do appreciate everybody who reached out. The bottom line is COVID-19 ain't no joke. It is not something to mess around with. There's plenty of people that are asymptomatic or not that don't show symptoms like I did. But if you get the version of the virus that I had or you get the effects that I had, you will be wishing you were safer. You'd be wishing you were more cautious. I wish I was more cautious, even though I ended up getting it in the middle of nowhere. I have examined my actions. I'm like, man, I'm not I'm not into the politics side of this, but I am in the side of what could I have done better to protect my family, and what could I have done better to protect myself. I am thinking about that and thinking about what I could have done. So, enjoy the holidays, but just take what you will from my story. It is what it is. But I didn't have fun with this at all. And so I hope no one gets the version I had, but a lot of people are testing positive, and we are seeing spikes in this country. So I just want to tell all of you, if you don't know anybody that got COVID, now you do, and you at least heard the story. So, and that's not a really good, have a great holiday thing to end on, Phil. You got anything positive for us to end us on?
Nope, not at all. Have a good week, everybody.
Jeez, no, man, no.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to say, I think it's important that you shared that story, because I know this has been Montana's been a hotspot for a while now. I know a handful of people that have gotten COVID, and they've all been relatively minor cases. But I think it's important that people know firsthand that it's not always a minor case. If people already didn't know that, and I think people should really be safe over the holidays. I think that's a good thing to go out on. The vaccine is on the horizon. I think we can hold out for just a few more months.
Yeah. No, I certainly I've been sick with the flu, strep throat, different things like that. I've never had a serious illness. Never spent a night in the hospital my whole life. Never had a major surgery I can remember. I might be, that film, Bruce Willis film, Unbreakable. I might be that guy. I never, knock on wood, but I've never had a serious injury I can remember in my life. I know I've never put on a hospital gown. I know I've never spent a night in the hospital since I was born. Yeah, probably a couple nights there, but since then, I don't think I've spent a night there. I've had some minor injuries or whatever. This is the worst illness I had in my life, and it's not close. And so take that for what it is, but it is. It's true. So don't get it. Be safe. Be safe with your families. Have a great holiday season. Have some fun. Eat some turkey. Eat some wild game. Do what you do, but do it safely. And get us some fun stuff on the internet for me and Phil to laugh at, and for you to get followed by me. So go forth. Enjoy. Say bye, Phil.
Goodbye.
Too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven.
After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.